All right, and we'll just get underway. Let me get to the convention documentation and I'll share that so people see what I'm talking about. Hello again, this is John Quetzalcoatl Murray. I'm an independent journalist with KEPW 97.3 here in Eugene, Oregon, and I'm honored to be selected to be the guest host of this Pacific Green Party virtual convention. This is our second live session. We had 3 hours yesterday, Saturday. That recording is available online. If you go to the Pacific Greens website and search through the events to the convention, you can get to this convention goer's guide. This has a complete agenda, all information about what we're talking about. And this link here goes to a folder with video from yesterday. So you can, if you missed yesterday, you can get to this MP4 video. There's also the Q&A, all the questions that were asked, the answers that were given. There's an audio recording if you prefer that. But what I'd like to do is kind of get started just by touching on a few questions that came up from people. And then we'll get into Seth will be here talking about how to vote using the OPA-Vote electronic voting system. So this is a virtual convention. It will continue for a week through next Sunday at noon. So these live sessions are just the beginning of the conversation and the discussion. They will continue online in the Green Party's IO discussion area, and we have some links to that. We had a lot of questions about this new format. We talked a little bit yesterday about that, but one complaint that's come up is people are wondering why they can't see all the other participants in the meeting. And that is because it's a feature of this technology. There's different kinds of Zoom meetings. We've been most familiar with the one called the Zoom meeting, where everybody can see one another, everybody can talk. This is called a Zoom webinar. It was set up to allow up to 500 people. That's why we got it, so that we could accommodate more participants during the live sessions. Unfortunately, we did not send out the notice, the direct mailing to everyone for this convention. We plan to for next time, and we probably will have that many participants. But the webinar does not give everyone that opportunity. Sort of the metaphor, the way I think of it is, people are sitting in the audience and then they're called up on stage. So people are, when you join, you're an attendee, and then you get promoted to become a panelist. As a panelist, those are the people you're seeing. Those are the people who get to speak. After their time on stage is done, then they return to their role as an attendee. They leave the stage and go back down and sit in the audience and listen respectfully to the next speaker. So that's how this works. As we said yesterday also, with this new format, we expect consensus building discussions to be taking place continuously. This is really the culmination of months and years of other discussions that have led up to today. And what you're hearing today are sort of the crystallized arguments. If people reached consensus, they're presenting a consensus position. If they did not, then you're hearing the two primary sides of a proposal and the main objection to it. And today is going to be really cool. One of the discussions, the longest one that's coming up right after Seth, involves a discussion about the bylaws that Brian Setzler started several years ago. And in fact, he's been working on for 20 years. So I'm really looking forward to that part of it. One other detail, just if anybody who will be presenting on the voting items that start at 1 p.m., if you have not yet put your name into the agenda, please do so. We just need to move people in and out of the audience and up onto the stage. And if we know who it is, we can have our tech team behind the scenes moving you back and forth. So with that, I think that's all that I wanted to say. I'm going to turn it over to Seth, and while he's talking, I'm going to pop in a bunch of links from yesterday that the speakers provided. The key ones we want you to look at, they'll be in the chat, have to do with the Oregon Peace Network. They want us all to fill out a survey by March 1st on how how you think they should proceed, how we should all proceed with our discussions. And there's another one from the Pacific Green Party encouraging you to donate and to become a recurring donor to the Green Party. And with that, I'll disappear and turn it over to Seth.
Okay, so I'm going to try and do a screen share here and bring up a sample ballot with some, and go over some of the voting process here. Okay, so you should see an OPA-Vote sample ballot. And so this is what it will look like when you actually get to the ballot. You'll get a short email that will look something like the bottom half of this. Then you click on the vote button and you go to the voting page, and it has a link to the entire voter guide here. So you go that for full details on each ballot item. The ballot itself will only have a very like a description of how to actually vote. And I'm still working on the text here. I need to delete some of this stuff here. We had a last minute change on how the strategic plan was going to work. But basically, if you approve of something, you check it. If you disapprove of it, you uncheck it. And if you want to abstain, you just click the abstain button. So each option is going to have an abstain button, so you can abstain from that question. And it's kind of grouped by the particular items. There's a question of when you get a multiple, like a rank choice thing, you can click add. And add an item. You can move them around like this, and it'll change their rank order. And it describes how we'll use ranked ballots. You put them in order of preference, one representing the highest preference. Any proposal you disapprove of, you can leave off the ballot. And you can also select to abstain. And so multi-candidate elections are similar. You can click whoever you want to add. And then rank them in whatever order you want. And then at the very bottom, you go on and click vote. And so that's pretty straightforward. So not much more to it than that.
All right. Are there any questions out there for Seth regarding the election? Please enter them into the Q&A area. Do any of the panelists have any questions? Oh, here's one from Barbara. What is the effect on the election of an abstain?
Yeah, what an abstain does is it lowers the election threshold. So if you disapprove, the threshold stays the same. And in most cases, there's majority requirement. And if you select abstain, then you're considered having not participated in that vote. So the calculation of the thresholds would change if you abstain.
So if someone wants to indicate that they don't want, is there a none of the above option? Is that how they would indicate that, or?
Yeah, for a no other candidate option, you would just leave them off the ballot. And when it goes to counting them, they go into basically a none of the above consideration. In some cases, if a majority of ballots have none of the above, then the candidate isn't able to exceed that, taking the reduced election threshold of abstains into account, then they wouldn't be qualified for that election.
All righty, great.
Chuck had a question, if you could show the ballot for his agenda items or for other business, is it set up pretty much the same way?
I'm about 2/3 done with the ballot, so I haven't gotten down to all of the items. And there's been some discussion this morning about what's even going to appear. So I'm going to have that done by the end of the day.
Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else on the ballot, we'll move on to the next item of the
There is
agenda.
one, well,
Okay.
there's, just a sec, there's two. Barbara, why is the election not anonymous? If Seth could answer that.
Oh,
Well, I could make it anonymous. In the previous version, I didn't make it anonymous because in a normal convention, we normally wouldn't do those anonymously. But if people wanted to be anonymous, I could certainly change that.
One more, Andy's not registered green yet from Natalie. He's running as an independent and needs to be nominated, which will happen in March or April. So for yesterday's candidates.
I see Chuck has another question too. Does this webinar method of running the convention an expression of liquid democracy? No, this is not liquid democracy. Liquid democracy is where, well, there's going to be a whole section on that. So maybe we can discuss what that is in the 15 minutes allotted for it. But just to say that this is not liquid democracy.
More questions? Michael Sunlighter wanted to know under the webinar format, if any people, those attending now, could be promoted to be seen today as a panelist type thing. That's from Michael.
does anyone on the SCC want to respond to that? I can just say, you know, I'm not on the SCC. I have not been involved in any of the decisions regarding this convention. I'm a guest host, and I'm being paid in time dollars. So all of the hours that I spend will be recognized in our local time bank. If you don't have a time bank in your area, the Green Party will recognize your volunteer time. There's a couple of different mechanisms for that. Nation Builder has something called Social Capital where they track your volunteer time, and then there are more traditional time banks. I don't want to take too much time to discuss that, but that's my participation, and I am not allowed to make decisions about the convention. I'm sort of following the guidelines that have been given to me. This format was selected to allow more participants and to prevent the disruption, to carry on the decisions that were made, to show respect to those who are speaking rather than to have side conversations. And there have also been people who have expressed concern about their name being made public during the convention because of past harassment and doxing. So we're using this format. It's a feature of this technology. The webinar keeps people in the audience sort of out of the spotlight, looking up at the stage, and only the people who are panelists are visible. For those, if you want to participate in the next convention, we're starting those discussions now. Please, we want more active people to be up here speaking than the same folks we've seen for the past several years. So please get involved on in the discussion area, and there's a link in the chat. If anybody on the SCC wants to add anything else about that, please jump in.
We have another, there's somebody raised Dan would like something about the ballot. He had a question. So Seth, has there been
Okay,
any?
I'll read that. It says, has there been any discussion? Go ahead.
Yeah, the SEC discussed this many weeks ago on a proportional vote with majoritarian threshold. This has been done before. I've implemented it multiple times, and it's been pretty good. And as far as the question of whether or not people understand it, I haven't heard from anybody that says they didn't understand it. But certainly somebody could ask around and report if there's somebody that truly doesn't understand it.
And Dan's final question is, was there discussion among the convention participants? And my understanding was that was covered by the initial OPA vote that went out in advance of the convention. Is that accurate?
I don't remember any results given for that OPA vote. Did somebody talk
Yeah,
about it?
I sent it to the convention list yesterday. I don't think anybody then made a report.
Can
But
you give a quick summary of that, Seth? I understand some of the,
yeah, there are 4 items on the ballot. The first two, approval of the agenda and process, and the majoritarian vote requirement passed. The progressive options of gender parity and youth proportionality did not pass. So we will not be using those 2 in our multi-seat elections, but we will be using majoritarian, and that's why I'm setting up the votes.
One more quick question. We're out of time. Was there a discussion at convention before that vote? These are our rules of order. Was there a discussion? I don't know.
It was a pre-convention vote. There was a 8-page document to describe the effects, and people could ask questions about it, look it up on their own, have their own discussion, and if they felt they needed more information, they could have voted no.
John, we have anonymous has some results of that. Is there a way to let people see that, John?
absolutely. Yeah, we'll put that into the chat. I'm going to start up Brian's presentation so we can keep moving along with the next agenda item. We went over a little bit there, but I think we answered all the questions, and we'll get started with Brian. And I need to share my sound to do this. So this is from, I was hoping Brian, if it's Brian here, can we check to make sure? I'd rather have him present live if he's present here. I am not seeing him because he's very articulate and passionate, and is a good speaker on this topic. I'm not seeing him in the audience, so we'll just go ahead with his video from the previous convention. This is at the 4-hour mark. He waited around with Alan, who is here, and Alan, let's have you get promoted to be a panelist so you can jump in too. And I'll just start with Brian.
So it's gonna take me a few minutes to get into this and roll on it, but I just want to say, like, when I've been around with the Green Party for 30 years plus. And when we first started, we were organized in chapters. We weren't actually a political party because we hadn't yet qualified for the ballot. And in that period of time, we accomplished so much. We helped close down Trojan. We took on forest defense work. We worked with the Migrant Farm Workers Union. We had big social events and things that happened. We had an Interdependence Day party. We networked around the state. We had offices. I mean, we just did a lot of stuff. And as soon as not long after we became a political party, this thing changed. And I didn't really understand it at the time. But when I was working on getting an MBA in sustainable business, I came to understand what happened. And that was that the mental models of what a political party looks like and does and how it works took over. And this meeting today has been an example of that. And it's like, I know we're all better people than what we're producing right now. And so I just want to say, I'm speaking today because I've spent a lot of time studying this and looking at it and understanding it. What I'm proposing is not really that big a change, but it's to give it a formal, what I see the problem is, and I'm also going to post some links to documents in the chat when I get done here. But what I'm proposing about is freeing us up to do the things that we want to get done. Because right now our structure, and this is true not only here in Oregon, but throughout the United States and through the national level and everything that Greens have created, we create a structure that pits us against each other so that we're always infighting about what's the perfect solution and how do I get to decide, if
Hey,
I
Brian,
believe,
I'm sorry, you're at 2 minutes. Sorry.
He's a presenter, so he gets
Oh,
5.
I'm sorry. My mistake.
thank you. I was like, what? Okay. And so one of the things I want to just say that's so important is that Einstein was quoted as saying, if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. And I really want to, that's why I kind of want to avoid jumping to the solutions really quick. If we open this up, everybody has ideas about how a political party should be organized and what we should do. It's not hard to come up with ideas, but the problem is, again, these structures that we're creating are causing us to be in conflict all the time, everywhere, when we should be working together. And so in systems thinking, which is one of the tools that I use to figure out like what's going on, I've been monitoring our registration numbers for 20 years, and we've declined by 30% since 2005. We've declined by over 10%. We've declined by over 20% just since 2017. We've declined by 3% in the last 3 years. So none of us want, I don't think there's anybody on this call who's a Green who wants to see us declining, and yet that's what we're producing. And I think the reason we're producing it is because anybody who joins this party and comes to a meeting like this quickly says, I don't want to have any part of that. That's chaos. I felt my life slipping away from me today. And so what I'm trying to do and what I proposed is a system like we had when we first started, which I found incredibly effective. I thought we were going to change the world, which was chapters or cells or independent groups worked on what they were interested in. And they didn't have to come and get a bunch of permission or think the only way they could act is through the SCC or through a convention. And essentially that's where we're at. So the problems I see in our current structure is that we have little to no collective action. We have constant conflict. We have declining membership, declining donations, declining influence. And what I'm proposing is just a independent cellular distributed network. It's not a decentralized network, it's distributed, where people work together. And I think when you understand it and ask questions and come to learn it, everything we want to get done can get done through that network. But the one thing that you can't do in a network like that is it's really impossible to control everything like that we think we'd like to control it. And I'd just like to say this last thing about control, and then I'll let Alan speak, because I've been working with Alan in I think a pretty thoughtful process, and I really appreciate what he did to help move this along, is that we so badly want to control, what is the green message and what counts as green and who does what and who says what. And it would be nice if we could do it, but at the end of the day, it's really an impossible standard. When I ran for office about 2 years ago as the city auditor, I immediately was hit with with things like, oh, I'm a fascist. Somebody put up a website and a link to a YouTube video where they took 10 seconds out of something I said one time publicly and accused me of wanting to assassinate my political opponents. And so, but there's nothing I can do about it. That's the dirty games people play or have different views or whatever. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do, my whole thrust of this proposal is to get us into doing positive actions, moving forward. If there's a bad actor or a group that's if acting poorly or not nice or isn't green, we just don't connect to them and they become an isolated group of 3. And I'll just stop there and take questions at the end, but and I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Great. So I would like, rather than opening to like debate about a person's
We're still within Brian's time, but is there anybody to speak or answer questions? Amy had a question, but I don't know who's here to answer.
Brian worked very closely with Alan on this, and Alan is the next presenter. So I think we can give the remainder of Brian's time to Alan to talk about their collaboration, and then to segue into what is different about his version of the bylaws from Alan's.
Sounds good.
Alan, are you available to present? Oh, I have to ask you to unmute. Every time we bounce someone up to a new level, you have to unmute again. Alan Zundel.
I'm here. Yeah. Well, let me give you a history of my involvement in this briefly. About 5 years ago, I was dissatisfied with the functioning of the party, and Brian knew that, so he approached me and we had some initial conversations about his idea, but I subsequently ended up leaving the party. I didn't want to invest the time in trying to make it work. I returned to the party last year, and it was Natalie who asked me to help do a revision of Brian's proposal since it was on the table again for consideration. So I began working with her on a revision of his proposal, and then we contacted Brian and showed him what we were doing, and then he got involved in it. And along the way, there was a lot of input from different people, including Brian, Natalie, Dan, Seth, to a lesser degree, I think. And I talked to people outside of the actual process of composing and recomposing it on Google Drive. So the final version that you're seeing is going to be mostly my product, because I made decisions about, when people had conflicting ideas, what should be in there. I tried to bring it to a point of maybe either how we could find a middle ground or where I thought, well, one side made more sense to me than the other. My understanding of what is attempted here is to move a lot of the initiative in doing things from any kind of centralized body like the state coordinating committee and the conventions for that matter, to members who get other people together with them and form a cell to do something, anything, based on whatever interest they have. In my mind, the couple of things that happen as a result of this, and that could happen, hasn't been tried out yet, is what I saw as people would come together in geographically based chapters, because that's what is in our bylaws, that you form chapters in particular areas, and they'd have disparate interests. And somebody would come to the meeting and say, hey, why don't we do this? And other people go, oh yeah, that sounds good. You do it. And nothing would happen because that's where they were reaching people at the meeting, where there's lots of people who had different interests. So the meetings weren't too interesting. Sometimes they became conflictual because people had different ideas about where to take the chapter. And the same thing seemed to also happen at the state committee level, because these conflicts at the local level would rise up to there, and there are arguments about which chapter actually represented a particular region, or whether they were doing properly green procedures or taking properly green stances and stuff like that. So if you let people just form cells around their interest and then they're listed on the website, people can be recruited into choosing which one sounds interesting to them, trying it out and getting involved. That way the state body can be less involved in trying to make things happen and let people do it. In fact, there would be an effort for them to say, hey, if you have a good idea, you try to make it happen. Don't come to us and expect us to make it happen. And when people have conflicts over what they're working on, they form separate cells and either they attract people or they don't. And at some level, it gets resolved in voting at the convention. So in a nutshell, I think that's what the attempt was, to solve problems by decentralizing in line with the idea of grassroots democracy and decentralization, which have been longstanding values within the party, to try to make it more real in our bylaws and find a way to make it work.
We did have one question already, Alan, and I hope that you can share your screen a little bit and show some of the bylaws and some of the differences. Amy asks, please explain what this new network would do that loose anarchist-style groups without official party affiliation cannot already do. Such groups already exist in our communities and do valuable work.
Well, we simply a way to connect them to the party. If people are members of the party or they want to support the party, they can move into the party to do those kind of things and recruit other people from the party. My initial interest last year was because Cornell West was exciting people, and I thought it would attract a lot of new people to the party. And you could keep those people by saying, hey, the things you're working on, you could work on into the party here and find other Greens who would support you. So it's not meant to like what? I hope I answered the question. I lose my thread easily. I haven't been sleeping real well lately. Sleep apnea.
And moving to San Diego, you're a little preoccupied, and also posting your weekly political Dharma podcast, which this week got thousands of views already. It's just incredible.
Well, I don't want to push for the bylaw change too hard because I won't be around to try to make it work. So I'm really handing this over to folks to decide if they want to do it, and people are interested enough to try to make it work. As he said, I'm moving to California, so I'm not going to be around even to answer questions unless people want to phone me up and say, hey, what the hell did you mean when you wrote this?
So I know that Natalie also participated pretty extensively with you and Brian. And we've heard from Brian, we've heard from Alan. Natalie, would you like to outline why you think this, the Alan version that you collaborated with Alan on, people should vote for that as the bylaws that should be accepted rather than Brian's original version? Is Natalie here? Yes. I'm asking you to unmute there.
Hey, John.
There we go.
Do you want me to start new time now? Is for the next speaker? Is this the next presentation part? Because the
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we'll get with Natalie, we'll give her the remainder of the time up till 11:45, and then Chris is here, I see, to talk about an option where, as Alan hinted, he said he'd like to get rid of the SCC or the administrative state body and conventions altogether. And there are a couple members who have been experimenting with different versions of doing that. And that is what one of the questions earlier was about. You know, does this represent liquid democracy? Well, no, that voting process did not. But these members will be talking about what liquid democracy is in response to these two proposals. So if Natalie is ready, we'll start the timer with her. And then, as we said, we don't want to interrupt anybody, but we will barge in at the very end of your time and show an online timer counting down from 30 seconds that will give you enough time to wrap up and finish up your presentation. So Natalie, please talk about your preference, the original Brian Setzler bylaws proposal or the Ellen Zundel Natalie version.
John, there's one other comment quickly that Dan was involved extensively in developing Brian's version, but was not asked to speak on it. So I'd like to split some time, give Natalie time, and then give him a few minutes as well to talk on Brian's.
My apologies, Dan. I remember that now. That's right. You were deeply involved and you've stayed involved throughout the process too. So my apologies and thank you, Lori. Please allocate the time accordingly so we can get both of them in by 11:45 and then turn it over to Chris to talk about liquid democracy.
I would suggest Dan speaks first because Alan and I revised Brian and Dan's version, so it would make more sense.
I will need a minute to pull up my comments, so you can go first.
Go ahead, Natalie. We'll just flow through it.
Okay. So the one of the concerns we had, and Alan, please correct to jump in if needed. But one of the concerns about Brian's version is that it was the definition of coordination of the state party committee was very centralized, and there was a lot of centralization. And so Alan and I actually improved on what we feel we improved on Brian's and Dan's original intent for decentralization and further decentralized what the state party committee would do, meaning that major decisions or like conflict resolution would not be brought to the state coordinating committee. And John developed an amazing process called the large group consensus model, which is basically a mediation or discussion consensus building process. And that's where a lot of these discussions would take place. So Alan and I's effort was try to further decentralize Brian and Dan's proposal. There was also a lot of concern about having, from where we are to like liquid democracy, there is going to be a process of training. And so there needs to be some coordination. The state coordinating committee or state party committee does have a role in pooling resources, coordinating work, like having been like a resource center or spokes of a center of a wheel to help other local parties get in touch with each other and so on. And so that is better defined in Alan and I's proposal. Those were the main two differences between the two proposals. The two proposals are very, very similar. I would like to share my screen. Can I share my screen, please? I would like to share my screen so I can show you the document that I would refer everyone to if you want to make an educated vote. You will have a whole week. Let me know when that is. What I can do is I can.
As a panelist, you should be able to share your screen, Natalie. Are you a panelist there?
I am not sure that I'm a panelist, but I don't have a share screen. I just to share.
Okay, if Dan is ready, let's try to promote you right now. You'll need to unmute again. Once you become a panelist, they'll automatically mute you.
I'll let Dan speak.
Okay, and we'll get you set up to share your screen. Sorry about that. Dan, are you ready to present?
Yes.
And then we'll come back to Natalie. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm assuming that the link to Alan's proposal, Alan's version of the proposal, which went through a long process, is linked on the agenda. I'm going to scroll through the comments that I made recently on this that describe my remaining issues with this, which tend to be few, but are, in my opinion, pretty very important. And I think there are a couple of poison pills in here. First, I'm proposing to strike the language about expelling party members. This has caused our party absolutely nothing but grief, agitation, turmoil, and trouble. Every time the notion comes up that we can't have top-down ability to kick people out of the party, people get scared and they say, oh no, well, what if we get infiltrated and taken over? I think that's a foolish fear, and it has always done more harm than good. Second, there is a provision in Alan's proposal that would allow an AC, an administrative committee member to be removed by a convention by a simple majority vote. This would actually reduce the current threshold, which is a 2/3 vote. And that's an important threshold because our SCC or administrative committee elections are typically multi-winner elections, and that means a proportional vote. You don't need a majority to get onto a multi-winner board. And so this could lead to a dynamic where someone is elected by 20 to 30% support, and then simply opponents turn around and put them up to be recalled by a simple majority at the next convention. I think that we should retain the current language in our current bylaws. There's also language in this about providing the party logo and voter list to, I'm sorry, there's language about approving use of the party logo and the voter list. The party logo is not, no one knows who owns the copyright for the party logo. And our current bylaws simply instruct chapters to put their chapter name on the logo when they use it, which is appropriate. There's no need for top-down approval for this. There's no question of abuse if a chapter simply says it's the logo of this chapter, puts its logo chapter name on the logo and whatnot. The voter list is generally public domain information, and the only restriction on its use and distribution is that it not be used commercially. I believe the voter list should be provided to all members for free. The $500 fee for the voter list, I think, is obsolete and should be repealed. But until that happens, we should be out in front on this issue of transparency. The entire public should be able to see that voter list, and we at least should make it available to our membership. And
Dan, is there anything relevant more that you need to add? We've got a couple minutes left for Natalie.
okay, yes, I'll yield. I yield.
I'm going to share the screen, which is what I wanted to do for you all to make an educated choice when you vote. This is linked to the agenda, and you can read. So let me just go to the top. On the left column is the current bylaws. This is Brian and Dan's proposal, and this is Alan and mine's proposal. And they are generally side by side. There may be a little glitch here and there with the spacing, but basically they're side by side. So you can see that for the most part, Brian and Alan's versions are pretty similar. So basically that's one of the things that I wanted to mention. Something that I wanted to mention is the logo of the state party. When you use a logo and you do branding, when you do marketing, when you want to do a publicity campaign, make sure that people recognize the party for what it is. It's very important that there be a concerted image of what the party stands for. Each local can develop their own logo. There's no need, to use the Pacific Green Party logo. If like 30 locals use the Pacific Green Party logo and they all have positions that contradict each other, it's going to be like incredibly difficult for people to know what the party as a whole, the state Green Party, and it's not because it's the state, it's because we are a network of people. So it's going to be very difficult for the network to understand what are the main positions of agreement. And that's why the use of a logo is something that needs to be pretty well managed. I mean, it's a very important asset for the party. It cannot be used by anybody who can just like copy and paste it somewhere else. the locals can do their own, the locals can do their own logo. There's nothing that prevents you from marketing yourself and branding yourself with your own logo. There is no new need, and Devin made a new state logo that he's proposing. So this is part of, as the party grows, we are going to need to develop a lot of marketing and publicity strategies, and they need to be somehow make sense to the public. Like if you have 30 different positions, people are not going to know what the party stands for. That is something really important. So it's not an impingement on the freedom of locals to act. It's actually preventing locals being imposed views from another chapter. And I think that that's the main thing. There is also an issue of if you have people who are verbally abusive, there is aggression, there is doxing, there is things that are really beyond what are common ethical standards, we should have some recourse. We need to create safe spaces, particularly for people who are BIPOC. Yo soy Latina, yo no soy Americana. And when I get involved in the party and there is a lot of toxicity and aggression, there's no way we can invite people who are from exploited communities. So there needs to be.
Thank you, Natalie. Your time has expired. So we're going to
you.
go to Chris now. Thank you very much. And Chris, you should be able to share your screen if you want to. In addition to the two bylaws proposal, then Chris is representing none of the above or none of these candidates vote, like reject the bylaws proposal, stick with the one we have, and try to develop some of these new innovative methods of participatory democracy. Instead of having structures and representatives, we allow all members to participate continuously using this delegative democracy called liquid democracy. And Chris is here to describe that.
Okay, well, that sounds a little more adversarial than I was intending to be. I don't really know. Thanks for the invite, by the way. And no, I'm not a party member, as a matter of fact. I was early on in the late '80s. I was actually a part of the Green Party, and I actually I don't want to go deep into it, but I'm actually not really into party politics anymore, or trying to elect third-party representatives at all. So I think what I'm doing is more of a tangential something that maybe the Green Party is interested in, because we're fellow travelers and trying to accomplish similar goals. But I'm not sure that what my liquid democracy thing is necessarily going to have. Yeah, I'm not really trying to change the party, actually. If I can just describe what I'm doing here. I have, let me share. Well, let's see. And I don't need to take a whole 15 minutes either. What I'm doing is creating, let's see, if this, I'm creating a website that uses the liquid democracy theory to poll people. Actually, John, let me. Can I get John back in here? Because
Sure. How can I help?
yeah, I do this better as an interview type thing, or you explaining like I didn't really have a presentation prepared here, and
yeah, let's do it, because we've done that before, and I really appreciated when you came down to Theo's World Pies there in Eugene and met with Justin and the other folks, Connor and Alan down there live. That was really, really fun to get together in person. So, what is liquid democracy? How's it different? How does this model of participatory democracy work?
Yeah, so the main thing that liquid democracy brings to any kind of decision-making process is it's a loose delegation system, so that instead of having to like in the bigger picture of trying to run a movement or an organization, traditionally we elect a single person to represent a district or a group and put all the decision making on that person, so that they are now the leader and they make all the decisions for everybody. And the idea of liquid democracy is to, given computers and the internet, that we can actually make a more intelligent system where we allow everyone to, the basic idea is like an anarchist principle that everyone should vote on everything that's going on, but that's too complicated. So what we do is allow people to choose among their own friends and acquaintances, people who can represent them on certain subjects. So it takes the decision-making process and distributes it among people in a more equitable way, so that you can have you can choose someone that you know that you think is an expert on certain subjects, and you would say, I want this friend to vote for me on everything coming down the pike that has to do with environmental things or infrastructure or social issues. And it just is an attempt to make that to just get smarter about how we delegate our choices and not have to go on the old school method where you just select one person and they make all your decisions. So what I'm doing with this, I had made a site called votemachine.org, and I'll probably change the name because I know voting machines are controversial, and it was an open URL, and I'm bad at picking names, so I just went with that one. But I hope to have a vote about the name ultimately. But the idea of Vote Machine is that I'm trying to create a way that we can that I can survey across the entire population, right, left, old, young, rich, poor, and start to get start to find people's opinions about the issues that I feel we're being poorly represented on in our government. So one of the issues I come back to over and over is in Oregon, as a longtime environmentalist. A lot of you may know that the Forest Service, the timber industry has an inordinate amount of power in the state, for the left and the right. That's why groups like the Green Party are here, because we all realize that timber money buys both of our party's politicians, and the end result of that is that the timber companies have very little restrictions on them. They get cheap wood, they get roads made for them, and they're able to basically poison people's organic gardens who have the misfortune of living too close to the forest. So I strongly believe that if you asked everybody in Oregon about this, most people would say, that sucks. I really don't like it when my garden is poisoned by the timber industry. But if you ask any of our elected representatives, you're going to find out that, we vote with timber. We don't ask those questions because they pay my campaign funding every year. So that's just a basic, I guess, am I getting there? Sorry, but I'm not being more well prepared here, and I don't want to.
No, it's great. You were saying, just to summarize, and in our previous interviews too. Right now, we elect, say, Val Hoyle, and she rides her horse off to Washington D.C. and she votes on absolutely everything. And under this system, you can participate in every vote yourself, or you can pick a different representative on every particular issue, somebody that you trust to vote the right way on timber issues or vote the right way on campaign finance reform. And you delegate your vote to them. And another feature is that you can withdraw that delegation or switch it to someone else. So, and you're a software developer, a game developer, and you've actually shown us a running system that allows people to get in and choose a particular side on an issue, to introduce a new issue for discussion. And another benefit that I saw of your system was it allows people to come in and join and at any time, and they're immediately able to be brought up to speed on what the discussion is, what people have already talked about. We're not repeating the same sort of mistakes or repeating misinformation, malinformation that's been addressed, it's been corrected. Yeah.
That's one of my goals here, is that in the big picture of social media, I'm seeing that we have a lot of political conversations going down, but they don't do us any good, because we have, Facebook threads where somebody will say some stupid thing about climate change or whatever, and you can easily debunk that, prove it wrong, come up with information and links that say that, obviously, we're not dealing with the sun being too close. We're dealing with carbon in the atmosphere. So my goal is to have all of these issues in a single place where the issue stays there. And if you want to have an input to that conversation, you can come back to it. But the idea is that when people vote in my little system, they're going to be put on whichever side they voted on, and then once they make that commitment, then they can actually vote arguments up and down. So the idea is that if a new person comes into this climate change discussion, they can see what the most compelling arguments for and against their position are, and then they don't have to add another one if they're saying the same thing. Or if someone puts in, you know, they want to add another one, but other people don't think it's relevant, then they vote it down. So, so I'm just trying to find, you know, some way. I've been trying to figure this out for 20 years now. You know, how can we address this, our social problems when we don't have a working government, basically? So I know it's biting off a huge amount, and who knows where it will go, but no one else has done it yet that I've seen. So I've unfortunately been dragged into the position of trying to do it myself. So that's kind of where
And I
I'm
know
at.
that this was inspired by a friend of yours, if you want to talk about Leaf a little bit.
Yeah, Leif Brecky was a good friend that who unfortunately took his own life a number of years ago. But he was the one that told me about liquid democracy to begin with, and it has only been implemented by the Pirate Party in Germany, as far as I know, and I think they used it in Iceland for a little while too. But yeah, it's just it's something I feel like, you know, we need to, at least in the greater societies, start to acknowledge the fact that we really don't have a working government, and shining a spotlight on what these issues are that are where we're all completely out of step with what we're being served by our government. So I'm trying to just be able to shine a spotlight on that, so that groups like the Greens will have more, you know, more people aware that we need alternatives, at least. And also, I'm hoping to use this for many other organizations, not just the great government problems, but a lot of nonprofit organizations and groups that run with a board of directors have the same kind of issues. You know, they have a large membership. They don't really query the membership very often. All they do is elect members of the board, and then the board makes all the decisions. But I'm hoping that my tool here will be something that groups can have their own questions and their own memberships, and and the liquid part of it makes it easier to query people frequently without wasting all their time. Because, you know, if a few people have are representing a lot of other people, then the people that really want to answer questions all day and fill out surveys can represent a larger base than just their own votes. But we're not asking everyone in the membership to constantly every week fill out surveys, and but I hope it can be a more efficient way for groups of all sizes to get in touch with what their members are thinking and wanting.
And is there, if people want to help in this effort, is there a way they can get involved? Maybe if they're software developers, or if they want to contribute in some way?
Yeah, get in touch with me. Yeah, and I apologize for not having a working version now, but I had a lot of changes in the infrastructure of how I'm hosting this. But the long story short, it ended up being about $300 a month to host the way I had been. So I had to change everything and go back to a simpler way. And I'm in the middle of still trying to get the infrastructure set up for that new way. But you can go to votemachine.org and see kind of a placeholder, what it's supposed to look like, but it won't be functioning for you yet.
And I just wanted to mention too that Seth Woolley has been an advocate for liquid democracy, and he has championed the German version. They have a liquid democracy engine called Liquid Feedback. And if you want to jump in for a minute, Seth, and say anything about that, I was looking to stand up maybe a virtual machine with that and get some experience with it. But we have a couple of minutes left to wrap up this third segment, where we've talked with Brian, and then Alan and Natalie, and then Chris. And if Seth wants to add anything, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, that is the presentation on the bylaws change, the big bylaws change, significant. And as Natalie showed you, there's multiple documents where they show side-by-side changes, and it's worth studying that in detail. Dan offered several critiques that are worth considering. We'll be sharing this video so you can review all of the statements that were made by the participants, and there are links in the agenda to all of the detailed documents as well.
Yeah, I can give a little bit on liquid feedback.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
So I'm not explicitly supporting only liquid feedback, just to be clear. I think liquid democracy in general is a good idea. Liquid feedback has been actually used, and they've well considered the voting mechanism. It also comes with a participatory infrastructure where people can propose ideas, and then they can propose alternative ideas in a similar way as candidates can be formed in liquid feedback. So it's not just a candidate means of implementing it, they also do issue-based. And to handle issues and candidates and to try to merge ideas of different issues, they have a form of voting that is curious. You can go look it up online. But essentially it prevents issues such as when it's like a clone proof problem. So if you have clones, those can sometimes affect votes. So they have a voting method that is much more mathematical, that tries to incent incorporating multiple ideas together. And so I think it was very well thought through. And I think we could also develop our own system depending on what our needs are. So I'm not opposed to any further innovation on this topic.
I was hoping Chuck would jump in with a question to the panelists here. He's expressed that a couple of times that he wanted to talk, but I haven't seen it phrased in the form of a question like the old Jeopardy TV show. Another comment from Natalie is that there's yet another method that's available through the website. Go to the Pacific Greens website. It's called Large Group Consensus. You can find more there. And who is interested in presenting and giving the fundraising pitch? We talked yesterday about the need for raising funds to do a mailing to the entire membership. There is a link that I'll be putting in the chat, but we would also like someone to speak at this time on behalf of this fundraising effort. Anyone want to step forward? And we have a raised hand. Who's raising their hand? Can anyone in the helper see? Oh, it's
Yeah,
Natalie.
Natalie and Ken.
Okay, Natalie, I'm asking you to unmute. There you go. Go ahead.
I would leave it to Ken because I speak too much in meetings.
All right, Ken?
Well, I would just say that if we do need to reach out to the entire party, and if we're going to do that, we need approximately $4,500. And so this is an important thing that we need to get done. And I'm asking people to go to the website, pacificgreens.org, and you can make a donation there. If you could put a note in there that this is for the mailing, that would be great. I'd also like to say for reemphasis, if you would like to be a sustaining donor where you donate every month, I would prefer that you contact me so that I can set it up through the bank instead of Nation Builder, because Nation Builder charges us a fee for each one of those. And somebody has to enter it manually. So unless you're willing to do it manually, I end up doing it. So if you contact me at treasurer@pacificgreens.org, I can set it up with the bank. It happens consistently on the same date every month. So, but again, because of the cost of doing a mailing and our limited funds, we really need to, I think we really need to send out to get the information from all of our registered voters. So please donate for this important mailing. Thank you.
I would like
Great.
to mention also that for a convention in early April, we need to fundraise as soon as possible because we will need to send a mail out early March.
Thank
But,
you. So deadline coming up. And
Yeah.
I've been adding the next speakers. Now we're going to hear from candidates for the State Coordinating Committee. And I have 5 names in the agenda, and I've been promoting them to panelists. Dan Pulyu, Mary Gedry, Devin Lawson, Lori Burton, and Amy Sachs. And we hope to give you each a quick 3-minute speech. So we'll get you all set up and we'll set the timer when Lori's ready. We'll do that, and I'll time Lori when it's her turn because she's one of the candidates too. So that's the order. We have them listed in the agenda. Dan, we have you first. Are you ready to go? I'm not hearing from Dan, so he must be muted somewhere. Ask to unmute. Dan, are you ready for your 3-minute candidate speech?
Yes, I am. And if it is possible, I have a camera connected. Can I use video? So
Of
people
course,
see me?
but you need to be a presenter, a panelist, and you declined to become
I-
a panelist.
Okay, well, sorry about that.
No worries, I'm promoting you again, and there you go. You'll need to unmute again. When we bump you up a level, it mutes you out.
Okay, let me get my
There you
camera
go.
started.
Thank you. Timer ready. Lori, we'll get the 3-minute timer going. And
Okay.
Lori, if you're ready for him, give us a verbal signal that it's okay to go.
Yeah, go.
Okay, hi. I'm Dan Pulyu. I'm an experienced anti-war activist, and I was this party's candidate for U.S. Senate in 2022. I've been registered Pacific Green for nearly 8 years. I'm running for state coordinating committee, and you can find the link to my candidate page in the Q&A box, which I'll post later after I speak, or on the agenda document. I have served on the SCC before for a little over 2 years, and I know how to do the job, by which I mean I know what the job is and also what it is not. The SCC are managers. It's the SCC's job to handle finances and convention logistics, communicate with the state, and provide assistance to chapters and members. It's not the SCC's job to develop ideology or to lead discussion, and not to act as an authority over the membership, but to serve the membership and represent the full range of views within the party to the general public. I have experience running the party website and the Google Drive. I know the party bylaws thoroughly and wrote some of them myself. I also helped start the current bylaw reform effort with my proposals in August of 2021. I have represented the party to the Secretary of State. I have worked on managing several conventions, and I led the organization of the 2019 convention in Bend. In 2020, I designed the successful party list proportional vote between the 8 presidential candidates at our nominating convention using instant runoff to replace the traditional minimum vote threshold. Now, this is something important to me. At every convention I helped organize, members were able to see and communicate with each other, even at the virtual ones. We used our traditional modified consensus process with motions, consensus checks, discussion, and sometimes votes. Members were not expected to just sit and watch and maybe ask a few questions. It is our right as members to make the decisions under our party's rules of order, which you can look up in Bylaws Article 4. Put me back on the SCC, and I will help get things back the way they should be, with decisions made by grassroots process instead of top-down authority. My ally in this is Lori Burton. She is one of our party's most experienced managers and facilitators and has been with us for 28 years. She holds a wealth of institutional knowledge about our party and its values and processes. Lori is good people, and I hope you put her in office too. Rank us first and second. One last thing, Seth's novel vote method is not proportional. In a proportional vote in a multi-winner election, you can win a seat with less than 50% support. What Seth proposes allocates all seats only to those with more than 50% support and suppresses anyone with less. That is not how proportional voting works. It is about who you are for and not who you are against. Some of you may not have understood this when you voted on the early ballot, but may understand it now. I ask that you help circumvent its possible strategic use by voting a complete ballot, which means to list all candidates unless you abstain. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dan. If Mary Gedry is here, please raise your hand. You may be in the meeting using a different name. We haven't found Mary yet, so we'll go to Devin. And if Mary's here, let us know, make your presence known, and we'll put you on at the end after Amy. So now we're going to listen to Devin, and as soon as we have the timer set, Lori, please let Devin know that it's okay to begin.
Ready.
All right,
All right.
Devin.
Well, at 17, I stand here as the youngest active member of the Pacific Green Party of Oregon. And since the age of 15, I've been deeply involved in our party, dedicating my time and energy to advocate for the changes we all believe in. To me, this is more than just a passion, but a commitment to our shared future in the party. I've been honored to serve on the Presidential Campaign Support Committee and the Credentialing Committee on the Green National Party, and now I'm ready to be more involved in our state party. These experiences have not only sharpened my understanding of the political landscape in our state, but have also equipped me with the tools we need to drive our party and its ideals forward. Why vote for me? Well, I'm not here to just maintain the status quo. I want to turn this rusty old socialist tractor into a hot new Ferrari. I know how to manage funds. I have my own small business, and I'm currently a manager at McDonald's. And so I know how to manage funds. I know how to revamp campaigns. I've been on 27 political campaigns. I know how to market candidates and political parties, and it's fun to me, and I enjoy doing it. So yeah. And as the youngest member, I bring a fresh perspective, lots of energy, and a deep understanding of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead, especially in trying to outreach our party to a younger audience, especially as Gen Z will be coming in to be able to vote now. Now, it'd be great to get them involved into our party. And I'm asking for your vote, and thank you.
Thank you, Devin. And next we'll go to Lori Burton. And because she's our timer, I'll be timing on my cell phone. And I've got a countdown timer, so I'll just hit the start button as soon as you start talking.
Well, hey,
Lori.
wait a sec. Like Devin has a minute. Is there anybody that has questions? Devin, do you want to take a question? If anybody
thank
has
you,
any?
yeah.
Oh, sure. If there's questions, I can take questions.
And if you want to post questions that are available to all candidates, just enter them in the Q&A. And we'll, as people have available time left, we'll
We have a raised hand. Somebody
raise
has
them.
one, a phone number.
We have two raised hands. Chuck Fall. Chuck, I'm going to allow you to talk.
Yes, Devin, just talk about your experience working at the Green Party US. You say there's 2 committees you participated in. Can you speak about your experience there?
Yeah, so I've been on the Presidential Campaign Support Committee and the Credentialing Committee. The Credentialing Committee is actively involved in, credentialing the presidential campaign candidates who have announced their candidacy for Green Party nomination. And so far that's Jill Stein, Jasmine Sherman, and another person, I can't remember his name, but we've all been actively working with their campaigns and trying to help them get the nomination. And then the Presidential Campaign Support Committee, that's going to come up soon. We take part in making sure that whoever gets the nomination from our party gets all the support they need from the state parties. And so I've been facilitating that. And that's been a great experience in working with other state parties and getting to know their leaders and how their party works and all that fun stuff.
Lori?
Time's up. Thank you.
Sorry, we have another hand raised, but I would encourage that raised hand to put the question in the Q&A. We're going to continue this virtual convention throughout the week. The discussions will continue online. So please enter your question and we'll pass that along to all the candidates. Next up is Lori. And
Well,
when
can
you begin,
I defer to let the other candidates speak, like Amy's here, and if Mary's ready, or let's have them go.
all righty. Amy, are you ready to go? We'll let you go before Lori.
Yes, hello, I'm Amy Sachs. I do have most of my statement, perhaps too much of a statement, available through the shared Google Drive. So everybody should feel free to read that. I don't have much more to add, although I was thinking last night while I was going over the previous day's convention of if there was anything I could add to that. And I thought of Seth Copperdale. I'm not sure how many of you know of him, but he was a New Jersey Green candidate, my home state, New Jersey, several years ago. And when he spoke about his experiences at one of the national conventions, he said that he felt a crucial part of being both a candidate and holding office is that you have to think every day about what you plan to do. And I believe he also said who you're doing it for. And I guess I'll just add that that's something I intend to do. I want to work closely with other SCC members. I want to encourage more people to join in meetings, participate, make their wishes and feelings known, as I have tried to do for the past couple of years of being more involved in the party. Thanks.
Do we have any questions?
We do have a hand raised. It's an anonymous caller. It's a phone caller. I'm going to allow that person to pose a question. You're allowed to talk. Area code 503. Go ahead, please, with your question.
Yeah, my name is Joe Rowe, and I am not anonymous. My ID is actually 1966, so you can reference me in the chat. And my questions for the candidate previously and Lori is, I just got an OPA vote that I consider to be completely against all Green Party principles. I've been a member of the Green Party in San Francisco, and then I moved to Portland because of the economic hardships. As a teacher, I could not afford San Francisco any longer. And my question is, the OPA vote, which is to me a sham of democracy, I'd like to know if you agree with me or disagree. Did you support, or whether you got the OPA vote or not, would you support turning our elections process for SCC members into this kind of negativity vote where there's no other candidate? I find that the OPA vote that was sent out was deceptive, and people were confused by the system because you couldn't vote for or against the proposal. There was just a checkbox, and there were 4 checkboxes. So even the process of the OPA vote I found to be corrupt. So Lori and previous candidates, Dan, and the candidate before that, because I did raise my hand, and then I think the untrained moderator on Zoom told me that I should use the Q&A. Here's a clue bus. I cannot use the Q&A because I'm on a telephone. I can only press *9. So please, can the candidates answer that question about the OPA vote and whether they support that kind of change in our democratic ways? Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Amy, since you were up, we'll let you go first.
Was he addressed to me? Was he addressing that to me? I thought he was addressing previous candidates.
All candidates.
I have not seen a new OPA vote, so I'm afraid I can't answer the question. I'm sorry, I don't understand the question because I can't see that vote. I didn't even know that it was going out today. I thought it wasn't going out until the convention's closed. My apologies for that.
Well, the time's up, and that's an open-ended question. So I think if we have enough time, maybe people can weigh in on it that have already spoken and such. And Mary is available. So I'd like to
Okay.
get to her, and then
I'm promoting Mary to a panelist. And then when she's available and ready, we'll let her go. Always appreciate hearing from Joe. Joe was the most successful Green Party candidate in Oregon history, as I understand it, gaining the highest percentage of votes. Mary, are you ready?
I guess so.
Okay, well, whenever you're ready, we'll just start talking and we'll start the timer at that point.
Well, I'll start the timer. I previously was an SCC member, and I had to step away for a while because I was caring for my elderly father, and he recently passed, and I have a little more time to devote to things that I'm passionate about. As far as who I am, I think some people probably already know me, but I'm a long-time activist. And by the way, I've started 4 community radio stations here in Coos County. Well, I've started 3. I got a license for a full power station recently, and I'm still fundraising for that. But I will definitely make it. And I've been on a lot of boards, and I'm currently on one other board, and I just think it's a fairly serious job. And I was an independent. I was unaffiliated from 1992 until a few years ago when I joined the Green Party. Primarily because I think there's strength in numbers, and the Green Party spoke to my concerns regarding campaign finance reform and so forth. So my main goal is just to help make things happen, get things done, try as much as possible to avoid the drama, although it's not always easy, and just be task oriented and look at things with a critical eye and decide, is this, if it's worth doing, then let's figure out a way to make it happen so that hopefully everybody is happy. So, like, I'm sorry I don't have a better prepared speech, but I don't. So that's that.
The one question that's been posed so far is about the voting process. We have a significant change in our practice here in the convention, where we've gone to a week-long convention in the hopes of allowing people who can't physically be in a certain place at a certain time to still participate by getting all the same information and then voting electronically. What do you think about that?
Well, I actually think it's good. This is the first time I've attended this webinar version, and I find it very comfortable. I'm being flashed at. I guess I've exceeded my time, but so far, and I've only got a few minutes to evaluate it, but I think that's good. It gives people. It is hard, especially when you're a small party and you're spread out all over the place. I think that's it seems to me that it's got some positive support for it. So I heard somebody else complaining about the OPA vote. I also have not seen that, so I'm not prepared to comment on it.
All right, and we're out of time. Thank you so
Oh,
much, Mary.
Point of information, there hasn't been any new OPA vote gone out. I believe he was referring to the previous pre-convention OPA vote.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay, Lori, are you ready to present? And I'll get my timer ready for you. And I was
I'd like to cede like a lot of my time so that the other candidates can answer Joe's question, because it was posed to everyone, and it's interesting. I thought it was rather confusing, and I haven't really liked the way the OPA votes have been set up. I do like the mechanism. I like being able to do the stuff online. I think it's a great thing to have, I just don't like the framing a lot, so the way the things are worded, and it seems rather confusing, and it's like either vote for it or it's a no, and yeah, everything's a work in progress. So I've been in the party since '96 when Nader was coming on. I've been in various leadership roles over the years. I did a little write-up. I wasn't going to speak at all. I'm a long-term facilitator. I've facilitated nationally. I believe that this group is a group of divergence and a group of idealists. And when those two things meet, a lot of times there's clashes, and consensus is an extremely important part to allow people to bring in different views without being laughed out and shut down and pushed to the side. The voting mechanism has always been rather contentious in my book, and it's a way to ramrod processes through, just like the rest of our democratic processes do. Yeah, so like when the vote's important, yeah, vote. And when people cannot consent to move forward together as a group, find out why. Hear the differences and, try to bring people together. I don't like being attacked personally for mistakes other people make. I'm willing to set everything aside and move forward. Mistakes are mistakes, and if I have a role in it, I'll certainly be accountable. But yeah, yeah, it's interesting, and the party's changing, and I want to stay in it for now and see where things go, and hope that people can be gracious enough to allow for the divergence that exists in the Green Party, because there's a lot of it, and we are a very small minority, and if minorities need to consider that fact. I mean, if you want to be a Democrat, go be a Democrat. If you want to be a Green, then remember we have used consensus for years, and don't just throw it out. If you want to use it in small groups, fine. If you don't think the big group can do it, I understand why. There's a lot of contention, but I think there's room to grow for everybody. So that's it.
And we'd like to open it up to the other candidates. There are two questions. Joe asks about the OPA vote process, and then Felipe also popped a question in, just asking, oh, where did it go? If you're elected, how committed would you be to actively participating in the SCC meetings, especially considering the challenge of achieving a quorum at times? And that's been answered online by Devin, who says, to answer Felipe's question, I will make sure to be at every meeting unless I have a family emergency. Other than that, I plan to be there 100% of the time. And other candidates, please feel free to unmute and just respond to either or both of those questions.
I placed mine in the chat.
Oh, okay. We'll make that available to everyone in the chat. Amy says she'll continue to attempt getting to all meetings. I'll share this with everyone. Regardless of whether or not I'm on the SCC or not, I think over the last year, I've missed only one or two of them. That's from Amy. Any other candidates wish to respond to Felipe?
Can this be verbal or just text?
Either verbal, go ahead.
Yes, I too never missed an SCC meeting during my 2 1/3 years on the SCC. I would like to respond to Joe's question, which I consider a bit more important because this is a serious issue. A ballot about something as important as how a vote is going to be done there needs to be discussion, and there needs to be an assurance that the people understand what they're voting on. Now, if I may, I'd like to screen share and allow the people to look at the objection that I made yesterday. And this is a bit down the screen here, but my objection is simple. The ballot was unacceptable because, number one, the voters were not actually shown the proposed agenda on that ballot. When you send someone a ballot, you tell them what they're voting on. Number two, they were not told in detail how these proposed voting methods would work. They were very vague. And in particular, they did not explain that they would invert our traditional proportional STV voting method into a method that applied a 50% hurdle, which is the complete opposite of proportional voting. Further, they were not given clear instructions on how to vote yes or no. They're simply a box of single check boxes, which makes it look like they're instructed to vote yes, almost like voting in a dictatorship. There was no instruction that not checking the box represented a no vote. What I was told in response to this was, well, raise this tomorrow using the Q&A form, meaning ask a question on this call to be simply dismissed and waved off. That is what this party has become. It's an extremely serious issue. It's a breach of our rules of order. And as I said, I'm trying to raise a point of order about that. I would like to have a check on consensus about this and restoring our rules of order on this call, particularly regarding this vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Stan. I'd like to extend the time. There's another interesting question in the chat from Brian. Joe's got one too, but he's already asked one, so I want to go to Brian's. Can somebody else find that and post that? I'm getting lost in all of the chat discussion here. Any of our co-hosts find Brian's question? Oh, here it is. Brian, we are not achieving our goals. Structure causes behavior. Are you willing, candidates for SCC, to address the structural causes of our toxic and dysfunctional problems? And we'll just let people respond either verbally or in the chat. And I'll set that for another 3 minutes just to extend a little bit to
I
get a little more
responded in
give and
chat as
take.
well.
Thank you.
I just find I tend not to overrun my time so much if I have to confine it in chat. Thank you.
And a reminder to everyone that this is just the beginning of the virtual convention, which will last a week. The conversation will continue online in the Groups IO, the convention subgroup. So we'll be posing questions and continuing the conversation there.
Was that a question from Brian?
It was.
Okay, well, yes, as many of you already know, I was closely involved with Brian in trying to fix our structure. In particular, I understand that it's not just a matter of decentralization, but moving to a distributed network model, which Brian convinced me years ago was what we needed. I made simple proposals simply to protect chapters from top-down interference, but the distributed network model is what would really work because it most closely resembles the grassroots democracy that our party intends but to use, but often fails to implement. Thank you.
I'll read Amy's. Brian, while I appreciate your work on this and making it accessible even to Greens on the street like me, I don't believe our problem is structural. I believe our problem is people. Devin's response in the text, Brian, absolutely. I've even gotten a bylaws amendment proposed to deal with it.
Mary,
And
did
Lauren-
you have anything?
Mary's muted right now.
I can't unmute her.
We can only ask her to unmute herself, but she may have stepped away. We have 1 minute left, so if anyone would like to address Joe's question about the OPA vote. I'll repeat that. It's in the Q&A.
I'll add something in just a moment. Bear with me.
Okay, and I'll just read Joe's question. My question to all candidates, do they support the OPA vote choice a few days, the no other candidate negative vote, which invalidates other people's votes? The Zoom host has distorted my question about a week to vote. Sorry about that, Joe. So I'll repeat Joe's question again. Do they support the OPA vote choice?
I certainly do not support that choice. It was a terrible ballot and a travesty of our process.
I didn't like the way it was written. That's what I stated. I also don't like the week to vote. It allows for politicking and vote engineering. And I would like to trust everybody in charge of vote counting and everything, but really have no clue if it's open to fixing. You know, if they do it nationally, they can certainly do it statewide. But yeah, that's me.
Yeah, there's another note that all of the folks who've responded in chat, there's two options you can do. You can chat only with the other panelists, or you can select everybody. If you could repost your chat responses and select that everybody option, then everybody can see what you've said.
I'm not seeing that option.
Okay, then
Only,
I will.
only the hosts get to see that
Okay.
option.
I'll have to catch up and do that for everyone. So I think that's the end of this segment with the SCC candidates that was supposed to run till 12:30. Let me get back to my agenda here. And next up, we'll be hearing from the candidates for the national delegates. So I'll read them in order, the order they appear in the agenda, and then we'll promote you all to panelists. So we have Natalie, Dan, Justin, Mike, and Chuck. And 3 minutes for each of you, and Lori will do the honors with the timer. And again, please post questions in the Q&A, and we'll, if people wish to answer that, they can either use their full 3 minutes for their presentation or split their time between the presentation and answering the questions. So Natalie, you'll be up first.
Clock's ready when you are.
Do you want to have a share screen, or are you okay to just talk from the attendees, Natalie?
I can share the screen. Some people are visual, some people are, auditive. I can thanks.
Sure. We'll put you up as a panelist if you have something to share there. And then whenever you're ready to go, we'll start the timer.
Okay, great. So I'm running for re-election to the National Committee, and I have a long experience working with the Green Party. I actually designed some of the communication procedures back in 2000 when I was the first national secretary of the Green Party. And the purpose of the party at the national level is really to support struggling locals or starting chapters, pool resources, to help coordinate, provide technical assistance and financial support. As part of the National Committee, I sit on the Coordinating Campaigns Committee. We do work with candidates in different parts of the state, of the country. I am very saddened to report that the contributions of 2 of our current national delegates has caused a lot of grief for Oregon. And I hate to do this in public, but I have to because it's a huge responsibility. But Chuck Fall was problematic enough that he was moderated for a month on the National Committee, which is very unusual. And when Dan Pouliot tried to appeal that vote or that decision, 78% of national delegates ratified the moderation for Chuck. And as a result of Dan Pouliot's participation on the national, one of the state parties, Washington, rescinded their invitation for us to go host a national convention because their contributions have been sometimes toxic and insulting to the rest of the National Committee. And so it is very important because of the differences across the states and the differences in cultures, because we have people who are very young, some chapters that have a lot of young people, others that have a lot of older folk. There's a lot of cultural differences. It's very important that at the National Committee, we have representatives who are going to be respectful of others, the way they speak, and also in terms of the collective decision. If somebody says if there is a national decision, that needs to be respected in terms of positions. I don't agree with all of the things that the National does. I have, voted against national decisions, actually, particularly on the statement for COVID. I lobbied for it not to go through. But I have a screen, I don't have my share screen. But again, I urge you to vote for me for the National Committee. I have an excellent relationship with most states, and very often my name pops up as a write-in for elections because people trust me. And what I want to do is—
Thank you, Natalie. That's the end of your time.
Thank you.
And then we'll go, is Mike available? Mike, we have you as a national delegate, but I'm not seeing you in the attendees list. We have Marge Stevens with a hand raised. Is that you, Mike?
Yeah, hi, this is Mike Beilstein.
Oh, okay. Let me promote you to a panelist. The order we've got here is Dan is next, then Justin, then you, and then Chuck. So I'll make you a panelist, and then we'll call on you in a few moments. Thanks,
Okay,
Mike.
great.
Thanks for identifying yourself.
Clock's
All
ready.
right. Is Dan all ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Thanks.
And I'm not, just like everyone I know, I'm not the least bit surprised that Natalie spent most of her time attacking me. Negative attacks is what she does. I'm not going to go negative. I'm Dan Pulliu. Again, I'm also running for a seat on the GPUS National Committee. I'm going to start by telling you what the National Committee does, and the brutally honest truth about that is they mostly fight and make up a lot of rules that don't accomplish much of anything. That's because GPUS is fundamentally about running that presidential candidate in as many states as possible. But people mistakenly try to make it about much more than that, forgetting that it is a federation. So the NC is at the top level of a grassroots structure and is not a leadership or a driver of ideology. Unfortunately, many members simply don't seem to understand that. I know this because I've been an alternate for the past year. I have not had the chance to vote yet, but I understand the process and have learned what is important. And what is most important, of course, is the presidential contest. What's important there is that it be fair. National has a history of having people tipping the scales this way or that way, putting up barriers to some candidates, including the candidate whose video on yesterday's call was nearly canceled. I don't believe it is effective for National to set standards for candidates. Instead, National should itself try to meet the standards of good candidates so that good candidates will finally be interested in running green. I will help make sure that that is what it does. Thank you.
You have a minute or so left. Is there anything else?
Oh, no, I had to write a lot of speeches. Come up with a lot of stuff to say.
There is a question from Joe. He does have a question for everyone. Should the U.S. Green Party adopt voting with no other candidate as Oregon PGP open vote we just had? Should San Francisco and Maine change their RCV model to invalidate other ballots as Oregon leaders just proposed on open vote?
I'll use the remainder of my time to answer that question. STV proportional voting is about who you are voting for. Say you have a 25% faction, you're electing somebody to represent you, and the other 75% are going to elect somebody to represent them. That 75% does not get to use the fact that it's a majority to say your 25% does not get in. What Seth is proposing is to put a majoritarian screen on STV voting so that a majority can grab all the seats in a multi-winner election. It is rare, but it can happen if a faction starts to vote strategically. And there may be some people who still don't really understand that, but basically anything majoritarian inverts the very meaning of a proportional election.
All right, thank you, Dan. Our next candidate for the national is Justin. Whenever you're ready, Justin, we'll start the timer.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm just interested. I'm stepping aside from the SEC after having served on the SEC for the last 3 years. So I'll have a little bit of my time back. I intend to continue organizing efforts locally, but I do think I would be a good representative of the Pacific Green Party with National. I think there's some evidence for that, the Stein campaign reached out to me as a trusted person when they were planning to come to Oregon and needed, a place to have an event. I was a trusted source there. So I've already built some contacts at a national level. And yeah, I just think I would represent you all well. I would, try to put forth positions that are consensus. I don't know that that's necessarily what's been happening with our national delegate. And finally, I'll just say that when it comes to the issue of fairness, although I'm helping put on this event for Jill tomorrow, I have offered the same thing to the other two candidates. And I do think, they all should have been invited here to present. I'm sorry what happened with Jasmine Sherman. I don't think that should have happened, but I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea that just because I'm proactively trying to push the party forward and our state party by getting exposure at this Jill event tomorrow, that would mean I wouldn't be fair to any other candidate. I think it's important to be fair. Thank you.
Joe had a question for all candidates, so we'll pose that to you also. Should the U.S. Green Party adopt voting with, quote, no other candidate, end quote, as Oregon OPA vote we just had? And B, should San Francisco and Maine change their RCV model to invalidate other ballots as the Oregon leaders just proposed on OPA vote?
Well, if you're asking me to respond, I mean, clearly Joe's trying to push an agenda right here, and he's trying to make a point about this whole voting thing. To that, I would just say I would, listen to all the voices in the room and all the arguments, and whoever, made the strongest case, I would support that. But I'm not here to litigate this thing right now.
If there are no other questions for the candidate, I'm looking at the Q&A and not seeing any new ones. And we've asked the question for the national candidate. So we'll go on to our next candidate, who's Mike. Mike, whenever you're ready, we'll reset the timer and let you speak.
Hi, I'm Mike Beilstein. I've been on the national committee about 4 years. Being on the national committee means you're getting a couple hundred emails per day, and I certainly can't keep up with it. And a lot of it is hostile bickering amongst members on the national committee. And anyway, I'm willing to keep doing it. I'm not really attached to the position. I think, my one virtue is that I've regularly voted, and and a lot of other national committee members don't vote or haven't voted in the past. So whenever there's a vote that comes up, I find out what it's about and vote. There's some controversial things. I've at least checked with my local chapter about how they feel about it. I think the endorsing these anti-war rallies concerning the war in Ukraine. I think that was something that I checked on because I knew that there was a diversity of opinion within the party, and I wanted to make sure before I voted that at least I was representing the people that I knew in the chapter in Corvallis. I've been a member of the Pacific Green Party for 25 years, since '99, and I'd say on the no other candidate voting, I can't say I understand the issue. I did think that the vote on the agenda and other things for this convention was confusing. The idea that you could only vote yes or not vote. But so I thought that was structured badly, and I heard from other people in the Lynn Benton chapter that they found it confusing. So anyway, I'll be happy to let other people serve on the national committee. I don't feel a need personally to do that, but I'm willing, and I'll do the best I can, as I have for the last 4 years. And I guess that's all of my statement. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And we're watching for any new questions that come in that we can ask to use the remainder of your time. If not, our next speaker will get ready to go is Chuck, our final of the 5 candidates for the GPUS national delegate.
Hi.
And
So-
then let's just make sure Lori gets her timer reset for you, Chuck. Lori, let us know.
Is the
Go,
timer?
go, go,
Okay.
go, go.
Go, go, go. Okay, so I obviously have to respond to Natalie's defamatory remark. I've been on the I'm an active participant in a quote discussion list, and people are right. So it's amazing how quickly people turn vitriolic. They do have moderators. Interestingly, I was moderated by someone, Natalie knows, Riley Mahon from Pennsylvania, and I made a post, and maybe Natalie would share the offending post that got me advisoried. But I was basically posing a challenge question to the delegates. What would the Green Party candidate say about basically the COVID, for example, and state crimes? And I was highlighting Robert Kennedy, who I think was independent or might have been in the Democratic Party. But I said, here I referenced a presidential speech he gave. I mentioned another independent candidate, and I posed this in the context of how would the Greens respond to these people in a debate? And it was for those kinds of remarks that I was moderated for elevating Robert Kennedy, and it was alleged that I was ableist because Kennedy was ableist. It's just amazing kind of hitting the glass wall of wokeism. So I explain in my statement that I do bring my green libertarian perspective to everything I do, but I'm also fundamentally a pragmatic, reasonable, and rational guy. And so that's what I look for is in any conversation, is a good logical analysis. And I just have to basically invite Natalie to share the offending email. I'm actually, on one hand, proud of it. 25% stood up for me. I think what it actually said was people were getting a little tired, and I did back off and have not been advisoried since. But I think the Green Party of Oregon can be doing a lot more to be engaging with the National. I have proposed a committee on accountability. It was taken to our convention, but it's been blocked, actually. So I would like to see Oregon advancing policy that we take to the National and really advance the discourse. Right now, to a good extent, discourse is suppressed. Chuck out.
Thank you so much, candidates. We've heard from the 5 candidates for national. We heard from the 5 candidates for the SCC. You will see their names on your ballot. So at this time, I'll be moving the
There's a
various
question.
candidates out.
There's a question, Joe. He would like to get a picture of the offending post by Chuck since it was brought up.
Sure, we'll make that available, Joe, and we'll share that and we'll send a link to it. Chuck, contact me, send that to me, and we'll make that available as part of the convention record. Again, if you go to the convention agenda, there's a link there right at the very top that links to the video, audio, and a rough, raw transcript of yesterday's proceedings, and we'll be making today's proceedings available as well. So you can go to that one folder for all of the records. So at this time, we'll turn to Justin. We're going to have a brief presentation by Justin on options for the next convention date and time. And then after that, we'll get into the various proposals and counter proposals, sort of a lightning round. I think there's either 9 or 10 items. There was a late item that may or may not have been approved by the SCC, so we'll find out about that. But we'll give Justin 10 minutes for this presentation, which is on the next convention date. And I think we have a little extra time too, so we can go over.
Well,
if
I'll
you
be
need
honest,
more.
yeah. Well, I'll be honest, this presentation is news to me. This is the first I've heard of.
So Natalie put your name in instead of hers.
Oh,
So I'll just read what it says in the agenda. Next convention dates proposed April 6th and 7th as a starting, or April 13th and 14th as a starting. And by having it that early, that would, as a presidential nominating convention, that would allow the party to start campaigning actively on behalf of that presidential campaign. And then
I
it
can talk
has,
about this.
okay, go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, so normally we want to have 3 potential dates set up for the next 3 conventions, and we do need to approve the next convention. So we're supposed to decide when the next convention date would be at the immediately prior convention. So for the first set of convention dates, we would want to agree on one of those two, if possible. And then for the next two, we want to see if these are workable dates for people. So in the OPA vote, you're going to see a proposed convention dates item with all 4 weekends. And basically the idea is you put down whether or not you're like, those are good dates for you. And if we get, the one that, for the first two, whatever gets the most votes on that would be the one we would do there. Although you can always vote against it and disapprove of it if you want. For the other two, July and January, you can vote or to approve or disapprove that. If we see a signal of a significant number of people not liking those dates, then in subsequent conventions, we can revisit those. And so the idea is that in April, we could be voting on the presidential nomination and any early nominations we'd like to do before the major party primaries. And then after the major party primaries, in July, we would want to have another one to kind of wrap up. Once we see what the major parties are doing, we can still nominate through August, but we want to do it a little early. We want to have it early enough that we can collect signatures and get voter pamphlet statements on the ballot, because that would be, the deadline is usually mid August for those. And so these are, like particularly the July one is a pretty solid date that we kind of need for that process. And for the April one, we are doing that a little bit on the early side. That's to try and get ahead of everybody. And in particular, minor parties often have a problem in that we don't have a lot of visibility into our early primary process. And so it's good to get some candidates like active going on early, being recognized that they're going to be the nominee, so that we have that longer push to try and get in the media that way. And then the January one would be where we'd have the internal elections and things like that.
Okay, Dan had his hand raised. I've been moving people back and forth between panelists and attendees, but Dan wanted to ask a question. Dan, go ahead.
Yes, again, I'm kind of pointing out the obvious here, but we normally have our first nominating conventions in June, and it really sounds to me like we're going to be giving another what looks like a kind of rigged ballot where there's no option to say, no, let's have our first nominating convention in June. Our current bylaws were formulated around this practice, which in specifically that our eligible voters are the same as the ones on the primary election voter roll, and the deadline for registering for the primary is usually in late April. This is specifically to prevent major party voters from switching to green and then switching back and infiltrating and taking over our conventions. There are other reasons too, but that's a very important reason. Long story short, though, there needs to be an option for those of us who want the first convention in June to be able to vote for that.
I'm totally fine with putting an additional option. This is the first I've heard about anybody proposing a specific date that would be an alternative. If you want to give me a specific weekend, I can certainly put that in the vote.
Mike also raised his
Mike
hand.
Bielstein and Natalie.
And I've
Mike?
allowed both of those to speak. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I believed, and I guess maybe this was wrong, that we could not have our nominating convention until after the Democrat and Republican primaries, and that's how we've always done it in the past. Now that I thought that was a state requirement, but apparently from what people are saying, this isn't a state requirement. This has just been a party practice in the past. So I guess I'd like to confirm that we legally can do this.
I can speak to that. The requirement at the state level is that we turn in the paperwork after the major party primary. It doesn't require that we hold a vote on a specific date.
Okay, thank you.
And then Natalie, you had a hand raised also.
Yes, and so I don't understand about what rigging we're talking about. The reason we want to hold the presidential nomination convention early is to make sure that we have a nominee, because as long as we don't have a nominee as the party, we cannot campaign for our candidate. We have to wait until they're nominated. And so we would be wasting 2-3 months of precious organizing for the candidate. That is a primary reason why we, at the steering committee, we talked about this and proposed to have an early date. And we talked about dates, we looked at dates. It has nothing about rigging. I don't know what we would be rigging. I don't understand the whole rigging effect, but this is really so that we can actually campaign effectively for the presidential nominee. And this is actually at the national level, there is an interest in moving all of the dates earlier because as a minority party, we face a lot of hurdles for ballot access, for, you know, campaigning and all of that. And so as the party, we're trying to move to be much more proactive and early so that we can run effective campaigns because they are changing the laws throughout the country for presidential nominees, for minority parties. And so that's the reason. There's nothing about rigging or nefarious or, you know, underhanded. It's a practicality to be an effective party that we can run our candidates early.
Is there an alternate proposal for April or something? I mean, it looks like the difference of like a week or two.
I don't understand the question.
There are going to be 2 dates in April that are proposed. But if there's a June proposal, if somebody wants to pick a weekend.
Justin also has his hand raised. Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, voice my support for moving it up a little bit for all the same reasons that Natalie, illustrated. The sooner the better. I mean, waiting until June severely hamstrings us as a party, and it leaves us very little time before the general election to really do a whole lot as a collective party. So, but we do. It's also, Kansas was the first. Just want to point that out. They've already had their primary. There's states that have already, making their decision, and then they're unifying behind a candidate. I just think that would be an advantage for the party. And then as far as the April dates, we do have to publicize any nominating convention. That's a requirement in the newspapers. So, but early April would give us enough time to fulfill that requirement. Thank you.
Dan raised his hand again. Natalie, do you have another question? If not, please lower your hand. Dan, go ahead.
Yes, okay, just getting away from all the pro and con arguments about having the vote early, what I'm saying is there needs to be an option on the ballot that we have our first nominating convention in June for those who want to do it that way. What this sounds like to me is kind of like a doodle poll where you ask people what days of the week they can come. Some might say Monday, some might say Friday, but there's not an option to say Friday only. Okay, and this is a serious proposal that I think a lot of us support. And of course, it's been what we've always done. Besides, it's our established precedent. And so it may just, there needs to, it's not enough just to have an option of which dates can you arrive, because that might well result in people who, it needs to have an option to do it only in June.
Natalie, did you have a second comment? Please unmute. Thank you.
No, thank you. We need to think forward and not in fear.
I'm just talking about how the ballot will be conducted. Because that's an option that voters might want. That should be on the ballot.
Okay, can we get a specific date in June? Because we're required at this convention to decide that date. So I need a specific date and I can put it on the ballot.
All right, we'll let people mull that over and come up with a specific date. What I'd propose right now is that we break for 5-6 minutes, come back at 1:10, and we'll communicate those specific dates to Seth back and forth in Q&A and or the chat. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back for the final hour plus, where we go through a series of proposals and counter proposals. So we'll see you all back in 5-6 minutes. Thank you. All right, thank you, Lori. We'll get started with our proposals and resolutions. For the first one, I understand that Felipe will be discussing both of them. So I have been trying to promote him to a panelist. And the way we'll do that, since he'll be both the proposal and the counter proposal, he'll get 6 minutes, 3 minutes for the first and 3 minutes for the second. Oh, there we go. I think I got him as going to a panelist. Hey there, Felipe. Well,
I have him at 10 minutes. Is that not the same agenda item?
I think we went to, for the final bit here, starting at 1:10, it says 3 minutes for each side because there's so many items. And even with that, we'll be running off over the 2 o'clock end time. And there's a 10th item that Chuck had raised that was under discussion this morning by the SCC. So we'll need some guidance on whether that was approved to be discussed as an extra item. And then we'd like to circle back around and resolve the convention issue if possible. If not, if we can't get it this afternoon, we'll let the folks continue that discussion online. This is a virtual convention that's a week long. It's hard to wrap our heads around because usually it's like at the close, we're done, but we will not be adjourning until next Sunday at noon. This will continue as a virtual convention, and discussions can continue. Of course, we do want to get that ballot out as soon as possible. So we will encourage those folks hashing out the final ballot language to work with alacrity. So Felipe, are you ready to present? I'm asking you to unmute. And then we'll give you 6 continuous minutes to discuss both the proposal and the counter proposal. Felipe.
Sorry, John, I'm not ready. I just came back from the break.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. Can you, I don't know, can you give it the opportunity to somebody else until I get ready?
No, just go ahead and get ready. That's fine. We'll try to keep it in the order just because the other people may not be ready either. We said we were going to do it in this order. So sorry about that, Felipe. Just, when you're ready, we'll start the timer then, and we'll give other people a chance to return as well. That was kind of a short break. And I think, we've had a couple of items in our scheduling. First time we've done it this way and and broken it into 2 days. Yesterday we were really long on the strategic plan and then kind of short on the chapter report. So we learned that lesson to give a lot more time. The chapter reports, I saw a lot of email. People really appreciated hearing all of that and returning to having the treasurer's report and the secretary's report. I got a lot of positive feedback about that. So that was good.
Could we ask if Dan's ready so we don't just run the clock and let him start if Felipe needs more time?
I think Felipe can get it going in a minute here.
Well, John, I'm getting some trouble finding where the proposal and contra proposal is, so I can talk.
Would you like me to
I
share
would
the
love
screen?
to that. If you
Okay.
share that and zoom in so people can see what I'm talking about, please.
Okay,
if you can do that.
great. Yeah, I'm happy to help out there. So again, these are in the agenda. There's links to everything. We set it up to make that as easy as possible for people who aren't attending so that they would be able to see this. And the link in the agenda for this item, proposal for a bylaw provision to require biannual planning. Can everybody see this? It now says biannual planning requirement. Can you see that okay, Felipe?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, I can see
Okay.
it.
Great. And
Yeah,
let me
well-
know if you need me to scroll or move it around at all.
Yeah, I will say up when I want you to go up. So I made a proposal long time ago, since I started thinking about the need for a strategic plan. And immediately I noticed that to be able to change the bylaw, we're gonna need some approval, like I think it's 2/3. So I got my little provision ready. I don't know, like a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago. And here it is. The proposal is nothing more, and it's not is, hey, we should put in our bylaw a provision that mandate to the SEC to come up with a strategic plan every other year. Because right now it's not on our bylaws, so we only do planning if we want to. And I thought that we need to make that a law. So we need to ask the SEC to provide us with a actual plan, a biannual plan or an annual plan. So here's the language that I proposed. Like I can read a little bit there. See, we need to have the obligation to create and implement a planning framework. So this is Article A. You can read it there. The Pacific Green Party should create and implement a biannual plan of action that outline the party strategic. I cannot see that well. My glasses are all dirty. The party strategic objective. There you go. Thank you, John. and up, please. And this planning framework will serve as a roadmap again, the roadmap that we need to know where we're going to guide the parties action in a unity and efficient way. This Article 2 is a comprehensive plan that includes those key aspects and clear and measurable goals. We need to have goals, but anybody can have goals. So how we're going to measure is going to be clear to everybody. The strategic approach should be strategic and method should be deliberated to define goals effectively and efficiently by everybody that is involved on making the strategic plan. And the budget allocation, we need to have, we can make plan, but if we don't have the support of the money, the plan won't go nowhere. So how can we allocate the resources? And that's a question that I also have in the jumping a little bit here in case that we go by reorganizing our party by cells. So who gonna decide how to allocate fund? That's a big one there. And membership engagement, everybody should be engaged. Actually, the party as a whole should be behind our strategic plan, so we can make sure that the plan that we provide is and produce be successful. And Article 3, Article 8.3, planning committee, the strategic plan is not about a person or two. We need all of us working together, but we need to have a committee that's gonna decide who's gonna be helping with what. And this, I'm gonna take the opportunity to invite all you, if that be part of any of this committee that may come out after, if we approve this. Up, John. And need to do we have a plan? Is implementing the plan? So we need to stop at some point, checkpoint to see if the plan is working. It's not written in stone, it's liquid. If we plan it's not going the way we want it, we should be able to change it and adapt it to the whatever is happening on the moment. So I will say that it's a contra proposal because the language seemed like a too long. And I don't know if Natalie want to talk about the little amendment that she did, a friendly amendment, which I am okay if we agree if that goes that way. Seems like my language was too extensive, and we have one that is a little bit sure that you are welcome to read it online. I'm gonna end up by saying, guys, if we don't know where we're going, we're never gonna get there. So I'm asking you to approve, to vote yes on adopting our strategic plan for the 24-26 period. Thank you very much. Thank you, John.
Thanks so much, Felipe. With both sides of the issue there. And our next item is acknowledgement of Israeli genocide, and that's Dan will speak on that. I don't have anyone listed in opposition, so it would just be Dan for 3 minutes. Dan, I promoted you to a panelist. And
Yes,
whenever we change, there you go.
So I'm going to do a screen share for this one rather than put myself on the camera because I want people to be able to see the text. Give me just one quick minute to get that accomplished. And okay, here we go. Now I have to get this panel box out of the way too so I can see it myself.
I've been fighting with that too all meeting.
Okay. I'll just deal with it. Long story short, our platform is long. There's a lot of stuff in it. There is a section in it called War and Foreign Policy. Unfortunately, the section on the website is a bit outdated as there were revisions to that in SIO in 2020, but this proposal is going to take that into account and propose to append language, very simple, to the point language, acknowledging the commission of genocide by Israel against Palestine. And this will append it to the bottom of the first bullet point paragraph in the War and Foreign Policy section, of which this is the correct one. The simple sentence: we hold that Israel has committed genocide against the Palestinian people, period. And I'm going to leave that up to comments and questions because in my opinion, that just kind of speaks for itself. It is something we needed to do. It is an issue that our party needs to take the lead on, and we need to, it is simply a matter of doing this. So I guess I'll use the remainder of my time to invite questions or comments.
Okay, we're watching for Q&A and not seeing any in there.
I do see one where there's a comment in the Q&A. Well, I'm glad seeing that there's no questions or comments.
Hey, I have a comment. May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so could we pass the baton to Lori Burton to take us through the striving for consensus, and could we arrive at a consensus on this?
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Okay, thank you.
Can we do this the old-fashioned way? And
we have an old-fashioned, yes. Can we have an old-fashioned moment? And or I'll just do it. Does anybody object?
That's not. You're making a point of order, right?
I am making a point of order, and so let's go to John, manager. Can we go through a consensus process here?
Oh, these are all up for a vote. I'm sure this will pass overwhelmingly as there was no opposition to it.
Can I make an observation then?
You're up next for your time. You would be using your time on your next item. And I would recommend that you discuss reinstate lane greens on the PGP website. There's proponent arguments by Green Liberty Caucus and PGP Lanes. So you have 3 minutes between you for that, and we're going to go into that time.
This is then I'll just observe that we're bypassing the process where we strive for consensus in the way that this convention has been set up. So I would have appreciated a simple, does anybody object? Have a brief conversation. It's conceivable. We could have reached consensus. And that's by rules of order. We're direct convention, participatory democracy. Meanwhile, I'm asking the convention to vote in favor of recognizing that Lane chapter is a chapter in good standing. I don't have the exact text, and it's posted, and you can go read it. And please do. And it's simple that they've been shunned for 4 years. They were shunned since August 2020. And I use the word shunned because one Thiel King left the party at 2020 in April, saying that the Lane Greens were COVID deniers. The language COVID deniers and shunned them like the plague shows that the Green Party entered into a state of a kind of Salem witch hunt hysteria over what's the truth about the COVID. So in hindsight, what the Lane Greens were saying is true. It's true that the COVID wasn't as dangerous as they said. All the policies really weren't effective. And in the end, all that was objected to is the event that pushed Lane Greens off of the Facebook site was around being, quote, COVID deniers. In other words, they didn't believe the official narrative. And they argued on the matter of the lethality. They argued on the matter of masking, of taking hydroxychloroquine to treat a COVID infection. Very reasonable, very appropriate, but they were shut down for that. And they've been kicked out of the party. And now I'm asking that they simply be recognized as in good standing. The convention in January, way back.
Let me have my time too.
Well, am I done with my time?
Well, he said 3 minutes between us.
Okay,
Is that
Dan.
right, John?
Okay, I'm done. I'll pass the baton.
Okay, I just want to say that, let me turn my camera on here so I look more human, that PGP Lane has been persecuted for the past 3 or 4 years, and it was for our views on current events, starting with COVID. We've been censored, marginalized, slandered, and threatened with revocation, all for doubting establishment narratives. Now, certain members of the SEC in 2020, acting outside any process, seized control of our Facebook page. When we got it back, they covered by accusing me of violating a non-existent protocol for email use and continuing to falsely claim our page. They attack us at every opportunity. You've seen some of it here. Delisting us from the party website, accusing us of abuse, harassment, and violence, and threatening to purge us from the party. Read our article that's on the link and see for yourself that our Facebook page was created in 2014, not in 2019. It's ours. The SEC cannot officially designate anyone to manage a page that does not belong to it. Now, this may look like a two-way
Dan,
fight.
you're out of time because Chuck spoke about another topic and took your time.
I understand,
It's
but
time
Chuck
for
rambles.
you'll get another opportunity. You guys have a lot of items here, so you can continue the discussion. But right now, it's time for Seth to offer the counter argument, and then the next one up will be show the Green Liberty Caucus on the PGP website. Chuck can speak on that, and if he wishes to give you a little extra time, you may. So Seth, when you're ready, we'll set the timer for you.
Would it be better to just have them talk about both all the same, since I think they got cut off? I'm fine just letting them go.
The agenda is organized by individual items. They did not submit them as a combined item. So
Okay, can you share the response from
Sure.
the agenda?
Yeah. Let me get back to your item. Rebuttal counter proposal.
Yeah, that one.
Can you see that? Is it
Yeah.
Okay.
I
I'll
didn't
make it
myself write
closer.
this, but I'm appointed to represent it.
I see. Okay.
So I wanted everyone to be able to see. So the main reason Lane Greens are not listed on the PGP website is not so much because of a difference of opinion on matters pertaining to COVID, but because of actions that Lane Greens as a group and as individuals that were, and until recently, continue to be particularly abusive. The precipitating event for the removal of the takeover of the Facebook group created for all Lane County Greens as a forum for political discussion. So there's a timeline listed here. The SEC officially designated Connor as the designated administrator of all social media pages in the minutes of August 2019. Now, it's true that the page was created before then, but it was created by people associated with the party at the state level. So local groups did have additional administrators and moderators added. So on August 1st, 2020, Natalie received a phone call from Connor alerting her to a lot of abuse, with posts being deleted without any due process on the Lane County Facebook page. Connor suggested to recuse himself and remove all admins and put instead Ken Adams, who is neutral. And Natalie and Connor called the other SEC members for consultation. They did make a mistake in not having contacted Dan and Ibrahim, who are two SEC members, because they had already been particularly abusive in that list on that page. I wasn't involved with any of this, so I'm just representing this here. The SEC had a regular scheduled meeting in 48 hours on August 4th, and we're hoping to resolve the conflict. But on August 2nd, with no consultation with any other members of the SEC, Dan used the main email account of the Pacific Greens to contact Facebook and retake admin away from the state party. They didn't see the notice and did not reply on time. They tried to reply later, and that there have been many attempts to try and correct that. But Facebook has, issues. They're not responding to that. And there are also a history of abusive posts and emails, including doxing of a school teacher, harassment at meetings, pictures of SEC members supposedly engaging in sexual acts. Many of these posts have been posted by by their admin on Facebook.
Okay, Seth, we're out of
bizarre
time for
emails.
that item, and people can follow all the details in that document. Again, the link is available from the agenda, and we showed how you just click on that link there with the item. You can see both the proposal and the counter proposal. Next one, Chuck is up. Show Green Liberty Caucus on PGP website, and it'll be Chuck with the proposal and Seth again with the counter proposal, 3 minutes each.
Chuck, will you yield so I can finish?
Yeah.
Because Seth set this up perfectly. Number one, the state party did not create our Facebook page. It was created by Sabrina Siegel. She is on this call, and I'm sure she is absolutely insulted. Now, this may look like it's a two-way fight to some of you, but ask yourself who is doing the attacking. We are here to ask to be reinstated to the website, and they respond by trying to purge us again. They want to, quote unquote, disaffiliate us, issuing a rebuttal with more attacks on our character, more smears, and now they're accusing us of trolling them with emails from a Proton mail address. These are obvious fakes. Some of them are doctored to make it look like they came from us. It's easy to fake them, and claiming that we did it is libelous. We have no Proton mail address, and we did not write that stuff. Why would we, when it's clearly intended to make us look bad and draw heat on us, like happens today? Whoever did it is no friend of ours. Now, I'm being positive here. We are a large active chapter with a long history and a combined decades of party membership between us. Again, all we are asking is to be treated fairly and listed on the website, and instead we're attacked yet again. Do the right thing and vote to relist us. Yield to Chuck.
I have a memo in the agenda. Please read it. It's an appeal. As Green Liberty chapter, we formed basically according to the rules. We get to create our membership. Seth is not welcome in the Green Liberty Caucus because he doesn't believe, quote, believe that there's such a thing as a deep state. And he accepts that all of the false narratives from the Warren Commission report, he insists that's true. The 9/11 Commission report explaining the building collapse and the NIST report on Building 7, it's all true, he says. The COVID narrative, it's natural, and the vaccine is the best thing since sliced bread. All true. I mean, he doesn't dispute that. He doesn't have any critique. And what's happening here is Green Liberty it's a pragmatic reaction to these state crimes and the big lies. That's all we are. And we're in the party. We've been here all along. And now I'm expressing that we want to be, as an activist chapter, to really advance resistance to corruption. And again, I get to discuss this in the documents. It's very reasonable. And this is not being proposed that the whole party becomes Green Liberty. No, this is Green Liberty, a chapter, engaging in direct action politics, and advancing the media. So we deserve to be represented. And it's the duty of SCC to give resources to chapters since we're the grassroots. It's all explained in our bylaws, and we ask you to vote to recognize a chapter and give us.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you very much. And with 3 minutes for the response, Seth again.
So we got the same response document in the agenda.
Okay.
It's a slightly different document. So the main reason Liberty Caucus is not listed on the PGP website, oh, that just killed my screen there. Oh, is because Liberty Caucus has engaged in similar undemocratic and disruptive behaviors and Lane Greens. Another reason is dissonance with basic Pacific Green Party values. Liberty Caucus was given a provisional chapter designation to keep the peace and focus on organizing and maybe bridging differences. To that effect, the PGP developed a free speech area that it continues funding for so-called dissident Greens to post and possibly foster discussion, called greenperspectives.net. Unfortunately, the Liberty Caucus members have engaged and supported the same undemocratic practices of Lane Greens that included interpreting rules so as to prevent Greens from voting at conventions. More concerning is affiliation of the Liberty Caucus with movements that have been very destructive for the party. Of concern is a recent meeting organized with Hugh Esco, a Green who was expelled and in large part provoked the disaffiliation of the Georgia Green Party because of transphobia, something which actually endangers trans and queer folks overseas. Finally, there is concern about persistent obstructionism and divisiveness. Members post messages with inflammatory subjects, often distorting statements, for example, gross distortions in the liberty complaints, and constantly repeating or going over the same decisions multiple times. This has led to moderation on the National Committee, a decision that was upheld by 78% of national delegates. Because of the above, the SEC feels very uncomfortable about listing a caucus, bylaws do not recognize ideology chapters, with undemocratic and divisive behaviors. Caucuses are also usually created to increase representation of historically exploited populations, not ideologies held by people with privileged backgrounds.
All right, with the conclusion of that one, the next is a call to halt COVID vaccines pending a congressional investigation. And for the proposal is Chuck. And again, Seth will offer the rebuttal, 3 minutes each. Whenever you're ready, Chuck, we'll start that timer.
Okay, I'm ready. And so this moratorium, the language for a moratorium came from a Green Liberty Caucus Lane Green chapter meeting. We joined together, and moratorium is a soft, moderate way to say that the information shows that these COVID vaccines, specifically the mRNA, are not safe and effective. This is basic consumer safety principles that we should actually be opposing these vaccines and advancing a program to stop and study what's happened. So the moratorium is inspired by the struggle of Lane Greens to have the free speech on their Facebook page. They were warning us, a kind of Cassandra. They were saying, hey, look, what they're saying isn't true. Look at this. There is a way to treat a COVID infection. And for this, they were slapped down. That's exactly what happened. So the moratorium is a way for the Green Party to take leadership and advance an important policy that's a pushback against what is essentially the military-industrial complex, because the COVID program was unfolded through Department of Defense. All of this information is reported in the links I provide, and I hope to get a chance to put into chat some supporting readings on this, and you have time to read up on this. So in effect, the COVID vaccine was never tested for proper safety. It was given an end run around consumer safety through Department of Defense provisions in law that characterizes the COVID vaccine as a countermeasure. I'll remind people that back at the SIO, the Green Party passed a platform plank that said we want to ban the gain of function technology, and this was applied to the COVID the SARS-CoV-2. The SARS-CoV-2 is absolutely, categorically speaking, not natural. And it was introduced into human society. We don't know how, accident or on purpose, but our position is it should be banned. So we have opportunity to make criticism and gain following. We can grow our ranks by engaging in a kind of what I call a truth politics. The COVID is absolutely not safe. It's not effective. The most heavily vaccinated are showing up with the COVID infections. I'll also close with this. We have an opportunity in our call for an investigation. We have a control group. It's the people that didn't take the vaccines. Against that are the people that did. Society can find out what really happened with the COVID. Green Liberty Caucus, in solidarity with Lang Greens, are insisting that the Green Party do the right thing and stand up and vote for a moratorium. Stop and study these terrible, terrible technologies. Chuck out.
Thank you, Chuck. Seth, 3 minutes.
Yeah, so Chuck's proposal is basically from their Liberty Caucus to remove the right of anybody to even have access to one of the greatest discoveries and inventions in this century, basically, which is mRNA technology, which allows very precise gene therapy and targeting extremely tightly potential pathogens that otherwise we would have to take many, many more years to develop vaccines against. And this is a much safer way of doing it. And so COVID was natural. There have been lots of investigations. The mutation count and size are consistent with natural mutation rates of RNA viruses. Zoonotic coronaviruses regularly infect millions of people in China every year. Every time it happened in the past, we'd have to believe the government caused all those other zoonotic viruses and diseases if we were to assume this one was not. So the default explanation is obviously it's natural because all the other events were natural. So you have to actually make an argument that it, like, prove that it was like artificial, but that's not really important to the fundamental position here, which is to basically ban medical access to wildly successful prevention mechanism that saved millions of people's lives. Will we ever be 100% certain what happened? Not really, but that's how science works. You don't always know everything. And this demand for a moratorium of COVID countermeasures would ban all the, sale of face masks, fresh air ventilation, soap, water, sale of plexiglass, UV lamps, any COVID vaccine, even if it's not mRNA, social distancing methods, naturopathic treatments, Tyvek, Paxlovid. It would ban ivermectin if you have a blanket ban on all COVID countermeasures. Early treatment protocols were never banned. They're just proven to be largely ineffective. Any doctor could still prescribe all that stuff. And the vaccines are safe and effective. There's been lots and lots of studies all over about these things. Lots of different countries have done it independently, lots of different organizations. The theory that it's all like killing everybody and whatnot is just not borne out by seeing all your neighbors who've taken it, and all the different entities that have investigated it and looked at it. It's a unanimous consensus of anyone who is an expert or has been paying close attention to this stuff in the public health realm. And mRNA technology is also being used. mRNA technology is also being used to target cancers now. We can do micro-targeting of specific cancer proteins from the mutations in the cancers. And the early results on that are incredible. We're doing amazing things with health. And the important thing we need to do is be advocating for universal healthcare and universal access to these kinds of technologies so that it's available to more and more people.
All right, Seth, and then the next item is also yours, and it kind of has a natural segue into it. Your proposal, remove anti-knowledge statements from PGP platform. So you can just continue on for 3 minutes. Sabrina is in the attendee list. She's on the phone. I can allow her to talk, but I cannot promote her to a panelist. And I just want to note before you begin that you'll have 3 minutes total. I noticed that there's 3 speakers listed, Dan, Mark, and Sabrina. So just to remind you, you have 3 minutes total. So however you want to divvy that up among yourselves, and I'll let the timer begin as soon as you start talking again, Seth.
Could you bring up the proposal text?
Sure.
Yeah, so in reviewing, there have been some recent conventions that were held without, during COVID that caused a problem because there are a lot of people who were staying at home that weren't showing up. So basically, it was heavily biased against people who were precautionary in their approach when it came to the vaccine. And there are also a number of other items that have been in the platform for some time that have anti-knowledge items. And basically what I mean by anti-knowledge items is they do things like ban research. And as a scientist and someone who does a lot of research, I don't think it's possible to, it doesn't make any sense. I don't think society's ever been improved by not knowing something. So we need to allow good, honest research. And so I'm proposing with the Portland Green Party Expert Committee on Toxicology to remove the items that ban research and reformulate them to basically limit their bans on commercialization and things like that, so that once the research has been done, we can see, oh, is it actually safe? And on the nuclear example, there's no proposal to re-enable fission power, for example, or even any other nuclear power. But there are cases where there's technology and medical treatments that use bred isotopes, and that's important. There's banning the research on any genetic engineering substances that would have banned COVID vaccines. The healthcare bullet that advocates supporting homeopathy and Reiki, when there's no evidence for them, there's a reformulation to actually study these things. So rather than support, it would be termed in terms of studying them. For the healthcare bullets, there was an insertion to basically ban or associate high voltage power lines with toxic chemical facilities. There's no evidence whatsoever that high voltage power lines are a problem. I have a lot of documentation in the document. They've presented their information. I've provided information in response to those. And the final bullet is opposition of implementation of 5G wireless technology. I work on Doppler weather radars and atmospheric sensing technology. And this is basically gobbledygook. They're using language that doesn't exist in reality, mischaracterization of radars. They clearly don't know what they're talking about. And there's a lot of information in the document where I talk about the safety of 5G wireless technology and 4G, 3G, and any other Wi-Fi.
Okay, thank you so much, Seth. The time has expired. And now we're going to go to the rebuttal, a total of 3 minutes, and we have the 3 participants there. So
Okay, I'm going to
whenever
start.
you're ready.
And
Shall I begin?
I'm going first, and it's Mark and you, okay? And we'll be done. This won't take me long. I've got my own timer on. Thank you, Portland Green Party Toxicology Expert Committee, though I find it hard to take it seriously when Seth, as usual, always presents himself as the expert on absolutely everything, it seems. So he's he's opposing energy action item 4, which is a sound reflection of our party's long-standing opposition to making opposition to nuclear energy and keeping Oregon a nuclear-free zone. I think it speaks for itself that this is simply an anti-green proposal. Regarding bullet 5 about sustainable agriculture, the proponent wants to water down our party's opposition to GMO food, restricting it only to certain modifications such as pesticide resistance. Rationale is apparently that because gene editing has advanced, that is now safer, but no evidence is provided that those advances enhance safety. Proponent wants to exchange simple support for broad healing modalities with a tedious call to restrict public funding for most of them and to add regulations when they are privately funded. This is contrary to the human right of medical freedom and should be rejected. Regarding the high voltage power lines, Seth apparently does not know that high voltage is converted to low power when it gets to houses. I'm out of time, so I'm going to yield to Mark now to speak about bullet 10 about 5G.
All right, well, thank you. The 5G rollout follows the same pattern as introducing cell phones to consumers by suppressing information that exposes health and safety risks. There was clear evidence from studies by the National Toxicology Program and independent scientists that cell phone radiation can cause cancer. In 1999, the wireless industry hired George Carlo, thinking he would give the cell phones a clean bill of health. He found there were serious concerns with cell phone safety and thought the industry should fully inform their customers of the risk. The industry attempted to silence George Carlo. In 2017, scientists around the world were very concerned about the dangers of 5G, and those concerns continued for several years. Since 2020, there has been a serious effort to downplay the risk of 5G, including Google and YouTube suppressing information that claims it causes problems. There's also been serious concerns by airports as late as November 2023 that 5G can interfere with radar, and airlines in the past have canceled flights over concerns with 5G. So I'll pass that on to Sabrina.
Okay, really, we're in a public health crisis because there are absolutely no protective safety standards for this radiation from wireless. The FCC was sued recently because the court was presented with a literal mountain of thousands of health studies showing that this is dangerous to health, and the FCC lost, and they were told to rewrite the safety standards, which they haven't done yet. And these standards are thousands of times too high by the Building Biology Institute and other foundational institutes that look after health and the environment. This is not environmentally sound or green because wireless takes many times, maybe over 60 plus times of the amount of electricity to use for wireless connections rather than wired. And
Sabrina,
so it's totally
your
not
group
green.
is out of time now. Thank you.
Yes,
And
thank you.
the full statement is available online. I'm sorry. What we've encouraged people to practice a 3-minute speech and pre-record it in advance. Part of the purpose of the convention is getting people able to present their points of view for different lengths of time. And I'm sorry that we had to cut you off after when you weren't complete there. But we're going to go on to the next item. We have a proposal to expel Marvin from membership. Seth will present 3 minutes, and then the rebuttal counter proposal will be Dan and Chuck. So Seth, if you need the document brought up, let me
go ahead.
know, and I'll do that again. I think this is the right one. Oh, I just added an item at the very end here we'll circle back and talk about the convention after we're done with these items.
Yeah, thanks for that. So, I mean, I didn't write this intro, so the proposal isn't to expel anybody from the Pacific Green Party, it's to remove the supporting membership status. Marv Sandness, formerly Sands, is an on-off registered Green who unfortunately ran on our ballot line, but has a long history of misogyny and bigotry with a record of anti-Semitic and sexist messages and actions. He was asked multiple times to be respectful and was also challenged on the actions denying the extent of the Holocaust. Because of existing tensions in the Middle East, it becomes imperative for the PGP to send clear messages that, as it has done on its webpage. This proposal is to have supporting membership withdrawn based on consistent, ongoing, and repeated violation of party principles in his documented Holocaust denial, advocacy of the same, bigotry, and misogyny. In the linked documents, there's a small subset of instances of such behavior. I've attempted to lightly obscure some of the items, but the intent is not obscured, so some people may be triggered by that. He should not be permitted to use party resources or have access to information on members of the PGP, many of whom are part of marginalized groups, whom he openly insults and demeans. In light of his repeated insults, his participation in meetings creates an unsafe environment. Valuable members have left the party because of his public as well as private comments. And so you can read the first document is excerpts of all of the of just a couple examples of each case that's being pointed to. Ken Adams also has a history of where he was of his experience being local to him and what he's done in his neighboring community, including inviting people who like having these discussions, promoting actual, David Duke supporters, Holocaust deniers, and so on and so forth. And there's also basically a bunch of documentation of overt misogyny and bigotry with sexualized messages and posts as the third link. You can go read each of those.
Oh, there.
So it can be disturbing, but we were asked to provide information. I would not normally platform anybody with such views, but this is part of our process. So we're trying to be transparent. So I hope nobody is triggered by that. And I apologize if they are. I'll yield my time to the opposition if they'd like.
Okay, that's Chuck and Dan, 3 minutes. You can split the time between you.
Okay, so here we go again with more agitation, more attacks, and more infighting. Mr. Sandus's testimony on Senate Bill 664, which was from 2019, that's 5 years ago. You can listen through it. We provided a link to it. I think Seth may have provided a transcript. And decide for yourself if you think it's a denial of the Holocaust, which it does not even mention. The remaining accusations also depend on insinuation and assumption of intent. Mr. Sandus may be politically incorrect in his speech and in his manners, but that alone does not amount to hate and bigotry. Most of us have said a few things ourselves over the years that could be cherry-picked and twisted to make us look like monsters too. And the accusers have done that to quite a few of us. Seth himself has had a habit of launching these kind of attacks on almost any basis. He's called people Nazis, science deniers, Putin lovers, whatever it takes to intimidate you and stir others up against you. But it takes no insinuation to demonstrate Seth's openly Zionist views. You can see verbatim examples of that on the link we provided. The difference there is that no one has tried to drive him out, because that is what agitators want, to form another of the Green Party's infamous circular firing squads. That's why so many others are implicated just for doing our jobs as officers to treat members fairly. This is not about Mr. Sandus. It is about causing chaos in the party. Most of us do not want chaos. We understand we have better things to do. We will not grow by kicking people out. We grow by focusing on our goals and allowing grassroots action to work. I yield to Chuck.
I'll just remind the convention that the convention in January, I don't know if it was a year ago or 2 years ago, for when the SEC moved to kick out Lane or revoke Lane chapter status, the convention said no. They didn't ratify the SEC decision. They said go to mediation. Subsequent to that, the SEC members have not participated in mediation. As we've pushed for reinstatement, recognition, capacity to participate in the party and receive support with resources, there's been an escalation from Seth. And that's why 5 years after this old information, he is advancing, picking a fight with Marv. So it's disingenuous. On the point of Marv, I'll just say he's an odd duck. He's irreverent. He qualifies as curmudgeon, and he says stuff that obviously is outlandish, perhaps on its face. Maybe he could be considered a historical revisionist, but he doesn't hate Jews. He's not a Jew hater. I don't think he's a hater. I think he's a real free thinker, and I think we need to be accepting and tolerant. And I don't think anything that Seth is pointing to here rises to the level that he's claiming it represents. I yield.
All right, thank you, Chuck. The next item is Dan to remove Natalie from the PGP State Coordinating Committee. Dan will give the proposal and Seth has the counter proposal. So 3 minutes Dan.
I'm going to do a screen share for this one, and I regret having to do this because I don't like to be the guy that is looking like he's doing the attacking, but this is something I considered so egregious, and in particular done by someone who just refused to listen and pretended that it wasn't happening. Now, prior to September 17th, pages were published, and I'm going to go to them. With a version of the bylaws saying, well, hold on, let's get back from that, but I'm going to have to, I have a few seconds to, I'm going to need a few seconds. I'm going to need to redo the share. Hold on. Give me 1 minute. I was unable to switch tabs while doing that. Okay, so I'm just going to read through this and go visit the link just so you understand what was happening. Pages were published claiming that auxiliary members are qualified to vote on party business along with supporting members. In an attempt to substantiate this claim, a page was created on pacificgreens.org displaying unratified and thus false excerpts of the party's current bylaws. Bylaws Article 3 sets forth these conditions for supporting membership. These include being registered PGP with the state of Oregon, as defined in statute. That's a law. It then plainly provides that if a person does not meet the criteria, that they can still participate at a convention but cannot vote at that convention. People who are not supporting members may attend meetings but cannot vote. A supporting member may begin to vote at the second meeting they attend. Now, the auxiliary member is defined in the Constitution, Article 3C, as someone not eligible to register to vote with the state of Oregon, and the term is not mentioned elsewhere. It's plainly outside the definition of supporting member and therefore not eligible to vote at convention. Now, the text of bylaws on that convention page said the opposite. People who are not supporting or auxiliary. Now, I boldfaced that. That's an insertion. Or auxiliary was inserted into the text claiming to be an excerpt of our bylaws. And again, number C, a supporting or auxiliary member may begin to vote at the second meeting they attend. Now, similarly, the text quoted at the end of Constitutional Article 3, as if it were a part of it, is not, and has been changed to supporting and auxiliary members can vote in internal Green Party members. Now, I read part of Natalie's response, and it seems to be a justification of this, is trying to justify it like it's how it should be, but it's not how it is. The issue is the falsification. These are not our bylaws. Plain and simple. And this is false information being presented to the public about how our party works. Furthermore, it may lead to somebody actually making contributions, financial contributions, and I think there might be legal implications, but I'll leave that to lawyers to discuss. The simple falsification of our bylaws in and of itself, I think, qualifies for recalling Natalie from the SCC. I don't know whether it will happen, but I think that it at least needs to be brought up. And that's why
Okay,
I'm doing it now.
thank you, Dan. And time's up. For the rebuttal, we'll go to Seth. I just want to also put in here, Connor, I don't think is present in the meeting. So if somebody would like to read his proposal, I can bring that up on the screen. And also this morning, there was an artifact produced that showed that Chuck's proposal to have a decision on the OPA vote had been submitted in advance. I'm not sure, I did not receive any clarification from the SCC on whether to proceed or not. I would like to just have that discussion because it has come up throughout the convention, and allow Chuck 3 minutes to speak on behalf of that and kind of summarize all the views that have been presented in the event that that has been approved, because it did meet the deadline. So Seth, please, 3 minutes for the rebuttal to Dan's proposal to remove Natalie from the SCC.
Can you bring up the document? So this is a very interesting claim here. First, it's a charge of official misconduct, and the SCC is merely interpreting organizational documents as it is required to do. So not making decisions on organizational documents would be something that could be characterized as misconduct. Misconduct is very well-defined in state law, and it doesn't apply to our organization. But even if it did, there would be no grounds for calling this misconduct. The background is important here. The amendment to add auxiliary membership was intended to allow people to be supporting members. That was what the whole point was. And the idea that we put in a text that actually doesn't mean anything, that it has no real ramifications, would violate the general construction of statutes. When there are several provisions or particulars, such construction, if possible, is adopted as will give effect to all. And you should also pursue the intent of the legislation of the body. The convention intended it to be allowing people to participate. And what it's going to do, the point was that there are some notable cases of classes of voters that the state of Oregon doesn't recognize. When Oregon was initially created as a state, all these people were allowed to participate. Non-citizens were allowed to participate. So we're trying to open up access to our own internal participation. For example, Oregon youth under 18, residents of other U.S. states that are temporarily located in Oregon but officially reside elsewhere, such as students, green card holding U.S. permanent residents, immigrants living in Oregon, incarcerated felons in Oregon prisons, people who have lived their lives in this country and in Oregon since they were children, but who are not afforded the right to vote by virtue of the current version of frequently changing federal immigration laws, such as Dreamers. There are some issues regarding foreign interference statutes regarding the latter group and whether or not they're legally permitted to participate in our activities. There's pretty good guidance on exactly what they're allowed to do. So federal law does allow their limited participation. We will remain consistent with that. But this is intended to be a broad opening of participation to people who otherwise wouldn't be because of federal law or state law that's unfortunate. And the SEC is just trying to be open and democratic, and there's not much of a reason to really oppose this. And alternative approaches exist. Rather than create a vote to remove somebody from the SEC, you could have just proposed an amendment to the Constitution bylaws saying exactly what he wanted. So why the animus against Natalie, I'm not sure about, but the alternatives weren't explored. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Seth. And our next item is one promoted by Connor. It's to just clean up the bylaws. I understand that we currently allow alternate members, but there's a provision that he's adding to tidy things up, and I can share the screen, and Amy has volunteered to read that. Do you have that in front of you, Amy? Are you ready to go, or should I
Yes,
share it?
yes,
Oh,
whenever
okay, go for it.
Proposal, excuse me, right out of the gate. Proposal to update bylaws, Article 12, Section A, post move to 7 or greater SEC seats. Our SEC was previously a total of 5 seats in accordance with our 4-pillar values and mission to grow the party through participation. A prior convention in either 2018 or 2019 increased our SEC to 7 seats, which with the stated goal of also eventually creating a reserve or SEC alternate pool to help avoid burning out our volunteer team. However, an unforeseen complication wasn't spotted and addressed at that time, namely the increase and its ramifications on the definition of quote unquote unanimous numerically would be increased, unintentionally raising the bar to affect basic party business from 5 to 7, when 5 had been the case before. So proposal is to change the final sentence of quote bylaws Article 12 - expulsion of chapters, individuals, or coordinating committee personnel, unquote, Section A. And the link is available on what John Q has placed up. There's a struck section, which I won't read because you can view that yourselves. It shall require a vote of whichever is greater, either 2/3 of the coordinating committee or 5 coordinating committee votes in the affirmative, or a 2/3 vote of the supporting members at a convention. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure.
That is Connor's, and there was no alternate or rebuttal to that. So Chuck, if you want to take 3 minutes in the event that the OPA vote does become an accepted issue by the SCC and is on the ballot, we'll have that on the record. So 3 minutes.
There's another question too about Dan apparently had an item on the vote in January. That's not happening.
Yes, that was on the agenda. It seems to have been deleted. I had linked all my information to it.
What was it, Dan, exactly?
It was the one about the vote, the ballot that was sent out, and this is back to the whole Marv thing again. The ballot that was sent out about Marv in January, just to just a few of us, the one-sided ballot that was, just basically an attack on him. I had an item about that to remove SEC members responsible, and that doesn't seem to be. It was on the agenda, and now it's not.
So none of those SEC members would be on the SEC, and they're not running again.
I don't know
So-
who they are. Who were they?
You provided them by name in the list, and they're
And
all
I provided the names of those that I knew at a minimum, but that doesn't mean they're the only ones responsible. So I object to having this unilaterally removed from the agenda. I think people need to know what happened, and they need to make up their own minds about who specifically was responsible, because there may be more than just the people that I know.
So can we just make for the record that Dan has filed a complaint that his agenda item was stricken or taken, and but let me just then, okay, so that's so noted. What's happened with my fourth proposal is for a simple bylaws that would recognize that open vote is a method of voting for absentee voting, and that it may be used for other voting at convention as well. What's been set up in this convention is that we're entirely going on open vote. We've been precluded from taking a simple consensus process. The moderator could have asked, does anybody object? We could have had some discussion about it. But the soul of the Green Party democracy is direct at participatory at convention. So that's the original intent. We're walking away from that. We're diverging from that. My bylaws proposal would simply say we're going to use the open vote, but we're going to show the results at the end of the convention, before the convention adjourns. So it would comport with our traditional method. The idea of spending a week to vote is going to, in a sense, almost weaponize with politics the whole action of the voting. I imagine there will be calling and lobbying. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in all of this, but I would certainly say we should stay with getting our results known so that we're not left waiting. And that's what my bylaws proposal is advancing to. I yield for anybody that wants to support remarks that favor preserving Green Party democracy. Well, I'll just say that I would say that the bylaws proposals, I'm going to probably vote against them in preservation of what we have now. What we have now is a fine system, and what we need to do is restore the rights of our chapters to be participatory in the party. Dan, I yield to you.
Yes, well, you invited comment and support. I'm going to mention to the people who can't see each other that there's currently 24 participants on this call. Only 17 of them are attendees. There was at most about 30 people on this call. That's less than half of the people that are likely to vote on these things, which means that the voting is almost half absentee. This raises profound issues about process that I think we've made abundantly clear here when it comes to the level of discussion that actually occurs between people in the same room or on the same virtual call. I'm done.
Yes, thank you, Chuck, for the opportunity. I'm with Chuck. I think Chuck and like everybody else want to drive by 100% participation. Yes, we want everybody to vote. And if you like Chuck and I will do, you need to call some friend, please do it. Let's make sure that everybody voted. Chuck, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
All right, and we'll await the SCC decision on whether that's going to be on the ballot. We are now through all of the agenda items that were up for discussion. And I'd like to circle
Would
back.
would you want somebody to talk about his proposal in opposition?
If you're interested.
I mean, if
Seth,
you're
yeah.
gonna, if
There
you wanted to
wasn't
go to
a
a vote,
proposal in favor. There was 3 minutes not allotted to either side, and I would prefer to keep it that way as an attendee. If you're not going to present, then no counter. It was just brought up as an aside. It was on the agenda yesterday. It was on the agenda that we received, and now it's not. That's what was brought up. That's all.
well, I didn't remove it, but it should, you've provided an opportunity to speak in favor of it, so there should be an opportunity to rebut.
I agree with that. Lori, I don't understand your opposition.
Oh,
Chuck had,
Chuck was talking about something about the OPA vote. I thought Seth was talking about the Marv issue. Sorry, Seth.
No,
No.
I'm talking about the OPA vote.
Yeah, please go ahead. 3 minutes. Thank you for volunteering. I would also just say that the decisions, I'm not involved in the decision making, and the decision I made is because this is consistent with the FCC's ruling to allow a week-long vote. If you limit the consensus process to only those who are here today, you're excluding Devin, who had to work today, Jenny, who's been ill, and all the other people who don't have the same privilege that we have. So the decision to go to the week-long electronic vote is meant to allow greater participation. We're meant to share all the information that we're providing here during this session so that they can use that. And we have a voter pamphlet like is modeled on the Oregon voter pamphlet so that people can participate at their convenience at the times that they're available to do so and have an equal vote in this process. So that's the reason for the decision. And go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, when I campaigned for Secretary of State twice, much of it was to expand access to democracy and expand, like the motor voter law I campaigned on, to really expand democracy. And the idea that everyone should just have these in-person meetings and every major decision should be by a tiny group of people in a back room or in a small Zoom meeting is just shocking to me that would be the best way of deciding the views of 8,000 people. I think we should be dramatically expanding it. We need to be communicating and sending mailers to everybody, trying to get them involved in much longer, more deliberative process where they can go online and participate in liquid democracy and things like that. We need to be innovating and expanding our access, not trying to make ourselves small and tiny and like we're the voice of 8,000 people. We aren't. We need to recognize that. And the way it's constructed, all the people who RSVP'd to vote, they're participating in the convention. And the vote will go through a week, and then after that it will adjourn. You will get the results at the point of adjournment. So you will see how that's going on. And we've already voted on whether or not to follow that process, and it was approved by the majority. So why would you want to bring up another question of the same thing? It's essentially an attempt to reconsider it. And if you didn't vote in favor it the first time, you normally wouldn't even have the ability to reconsider that vote. So we said that this is what we wanted to do, and you're trying to just force a reconsideration of the same thing people had already voted on. So
can I just quickly respond and just say that the seriousness of a week-long voting, the changes that are being advanced unilaterally by the SEC really should be represented as bylaws, and they should have been presented that way. And instead, methods of voting and changes in the way we run our conventions are being effectively insinuated and not going through a real consideration for process. I think flipping the front load our conventions with all of the documented stuff so that when we get to convention, we've already studied up. Maybe that's a reasonable approach. But I think this idea of this go off and vote now just doesn't seem optimal, in my opinion. Chuck out.
That's fine.
Thank you so much. And now let's circle back to the open issue that we have about the convention date and time. Dan was going to consult the calendar and propose a date to discuss with Seth.
Well, I forgot what I wrote, but I came up with June 1st or potentially May 25th because the primary is the Tuesday before Saturday, May 25th. And our bylaws specify that our eligible voters are those who register PGP by the primary election deadline. That separates us from the Democratic and Republican primaries. And so May 25th would be the first day after, and June 1st would be the next day after that. There's arguments for pros and cons for both. You know, I see some people want to have this as early as possible. Other people don't want people that are tired out from the major party primaries. But let's go ahead with May 25th then. I'll propose
So
that.
May 27th is Memorial Day. So you're basically proposing a
Okay, June
convention
1st.
for Memorial Day weekend.
Then I'll propose June 1st. Good catch. We'll go with June 1st.
Yeah, well, I plan on putting June 1st and 2nd, I believe. Are those the correct days for the weekend?
Yeah, June 1st is a Saturday, and
Yeah.
I don't really want to propose a 2-day nominating convention. But what the hell? We'll call it the weekend of June 1st to 2nd and hash it out from that.
Okay, is there anybody else that has a different preferred date?
We're including April still, right?
Yeah, we still have April in there. Somebody proposed May 21st. June 1st seems good. No, wait, Devin says May 24th. Can we invite Devin to speak to his dates?
Sure.
He's got multiple suggestions, and I'm trying to.
Devin, you should be allowed to talk now.
Perfect. Sorry, I just got off the phone. Actually, it sounds like May 25th might be the best because it's a Saturday and it's the same week as the two major primaries. And I think that us getting our nomination out of the way at the same time would be great. Just so we have all party nominations done in Oregon, Democratic, Republican, Green. I believe the Libertarian Party is also doing their party nomination that same week. So I propose May 25th. Yeah.
Okay, so Devin, we had just mentioned that Memorial Day weekend was that weekend, so we generally try to avoid that. So there was an alternative suggestion of June 1st and 2nd.
Ken has his hand raised. He would like to comment on June 1st and 2nd. Ken Adams.
Yeah, I would like to just point out that I'll be working June 1st and 2nd. And to Chuck's point before about not using OPA-vote and keeping it open during the convention, that would basically make it so that I could not vote in that. And I would just point out that, you know, we have a primary system in here where people get to vote. They get sent a ballot and it gets mailed in. And I think that is very reasonable, and we should endorse that kind of behavior, not just limiting it to just one particular date. Thank you.
Dan?
Yes, just as a point of information, candidate nominations, which is what this convention is about, are among the few things that our bylaws actually do state are eligible for absentee voting. So that would not really be a concern for this convention.
All right, thank you so much. I think we have some dates that are now available for consideration that Seth will send around. And wow, we got through a lot of material. I like this 3-hour max thing. We did run over a little bit. Here at the end, I just want to remind everyone that this virtual convention, the format that was set up, will continue through the week. Discussions available. There's a link here to the groups.io convention area. Please, if you have additional questions that haven't been answered here, or if you think of something else that this discussion prompts, please feel free to continue the discussion out there throughout the week. We'll get that ballot as soon as we can. There are a few final decisions to be made, and we've heard a lot of comments about try to clarify the language. So we'll take that into account with the final version. Again, consensus takes time. Let's start now so that in June, when we come, if it's June, when we come back to that next convention, whenever it may be, we'll have spent the rest of February, March, and whatever of April and May, whatever months leading up to that convention, we will have been discussing issues, and we will be able to present them for a decision for a large number of people to be able to absorb that information and make a decision together. So finally, we are going to send out an evaluation. This has been a very big change for the Pacific Green Party to use the format that we use this weekend. Big change. We look forward to your comments, your thoughts, and we'll be asking for a lot of ratings on all of the different segments of the convention. And then finally having some open-ended questions where you can just share free form your thoughts on what we've done here this weekend. So thank you all so much for attending. Thank you to all the participants. Thank you to all the panelists who spoke and spent all that time preparing the written statements for the voter pamphlet. This was also a new component. It took a lot of extra work for all these volunteers to prepare the written statements and to assemble them online. So thanks to all of them. And finally, thanks to all of our online behind the scenes backstage tech team, our timers, our Q&A helpers, our chat helpers, everyone who participated. Thank you so much. And we look forward to your comments and your continued participation online.
Hey, John, I have one request to make, and that's can the people who had specific dates for the next convention provide a summary of why they want that date so I can have it in the voter guide? Because right now it's just a list of dates with no context. So people who are advocating one or the other, if we had information there, it would be good to get that out to the people who haven't been able to watch this whole meeting.
That's a great idea, Seth. And I'll also supply a transcript of this recording as soon as possible. And some of that information will be in the discussion, in that final discussion of why people were advocating for specific dates. I know Dan spoke and Mike spoke about conflict with the other primary. All right, I'm going to say that this part of the convention is done, and the virtual convention continues through next Sunday at noon. I'm going to stay online for a minute and make sure I harvest all of the Q&A so that can be shared, but everyone else, you're free to leave. Thank you so much.
John, if I can, before I leave, I want to celebrate all the successes that we have in this convention. Thank you to you, especially for taking this position and make us having a decent, quiet convention. Very happy to hear about all the section on the Pacific Green Party. That was a great idea. I applaud it. I hope that we continue doing that. Listening to the state of the party and the state of the chapter was great. Thank you all. Bye.
And a reminder that the Jill Stein event is tomorrow up in Portland. If you can help out, please contact Justin. Also, if you are going to be in attendance, pull out your camera and videotape, try to get some video of the candidate and the event that we can assemble, that the media team can assemble. It's rare that we get a presidential candidate here in the state, and we want to use that in promotional materials.
Joe.
Thanks.
Joe's got a hand raised.
Yeah, well, I can see, that people have concerns. We all love vote by mail in Oregon. And there was a comment earlier that kind of took target where there was no target to be taken, and that is that people in the Green Party want to remove kind of vote by mail, OPA vote for their fellow members. No one's doing that. But I think we really do have to stick to our bylaws and say that if stuff comes up in the convention, that's very different and should be segmented from the kind of vote by mail, the OPA vote for candidates for the SEC and other nominations. And I am just discouraged greatly because everyone's using this word consensus, and it's like the movie Princess Bride. I don't think the people who I just heard in the last 3 minutes who are celebrating the success of these last 2 days, it's like in Princess Bride. I don't think you know what you mean about that word. There was zero consensus today and yesterday. This has been a sham of democracy and consensus like I saw in San Francisco. And I'm just really surprised at how much ignorance there is over consensus. This party in Oregon has turned into dysfunction from the top. Don't blame it on Chuck or Dan. There is no success for me to celebrate today. And I often disagree with Chuck and Dan. And I think a lot of people do. And we all have disagreements, but there is zero consensus going on in the state. And to close, I ran for office twice, and I worked with Trisha and other people, and I had Nation Builder Access. And Nation Builder Access let me have chapter events. In the early 2000s, I would have movie nights in Portland, and people would show up.
Do you want like 30 minutes to just ramble, or is that what you want?
Hey,
Let's
Seth,
just keep going.
I didn't know there was a time limit. Is there a time limit? Because I can adhere to it. But if you want to interrupt me, go ahead. So I'm not going to answer your question because you're just interrupting me. You're not really asking a question. You know I don't want to rant for 30 minutes. I will close up. Okay? But Seth, you're contemptuous. And you know what consensus is of all people. And there was none of it in the last 2 days. And to finish my thoughts, I was here in the early 2000s and I had access because we kept member lists and chapters on spreadsheets. And now it's all been centralized and locked away from people actually doing work. And when I ran for office in 2016, 2014, I had access to Nation Builder. I also used that access throughout the years to build chapter events. And then Natalie came up with a rule in her own head that I was inactive for like 9 months or 12 months.
Sorry, Joe, I'm muting you. There's no reason for this diatribe.
I'm going to close this meeting, but I would
Yeah,
invite.
well, Seth's not running the meeting either, and that's really rude. And he's got no business doing what he's doing. And Joe was winding up. He had a right to speak. That's the problem with this, is that nobody gets to speak except if you're the privileged few who are calling themselves co-hosts, which that's what Seth is. So not cool. And that's why I didn't want SDC members on the co-host list, because they run enough of the state. They need to let other people have a moment, and the meeting's over.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, the meeting's over. I rest my case by the person who just spoke before me, and I'm Joe Rowe. And at some point, we could get the party chapter working here again on other things. But right now, the Portland chapter is just simply doing, like, the only recent activity I've seen is Justin organizing Jill Stein's visit, which is great. So I rest my case.
There's a lot of activity in the Portland Green chapter. You're not.
I'm on the
you're
list,
not,
and I follow Facebook. I don't see any in-person events or I've worked for candidates.
You're not communicated about them, and your behavior here is exactly why.
Well, it's on Facebook. How is everybody else seeing these and I'm not seeing them on Facebook and Groups.io? So maybe you're really good about getting messages out to thousands of people, but not me. But Seth, you interrupted me again, so I'm going to finish, okay? It's great that Jill Stein is coming. Thank you to Justin for organizing that. I look forward to a Green Party that has consensus and actually does events in person rather than just like talk about how great things are online.
Thanks, Joe. I just want to say, you know, I'm a working journalist, and I am collecting 3-minute speeches. So anybody who wants to prepare a 3-minute speech, I'll be collecting that and putting that online so that people can see it. I've got a couple of them, one from Randy Prince in Eugene, one from Charles Newland. So if you care to do that, contact me. My information's available in from wholecommunity.news. This is over. I'm just gonna let people keep talking. This is like the social hour after the meeting's over. So Chuck and then Dan.
Yeah, you can end the recording if you want. You don't need to keep recording, John. But I sent you a PDF, and I copied and pasted the email thread that I got in trouble over. And I've been defamed, so I'm sure people are wondering, what's she talking about? So the record is, would you share that in some way so that what's the best thing for you? Was the PDF a good way to communicate that to you? Or was just the raw copy in the body of an email the easier way so you can copy it and paste it? What works best for you, John?
Well, the way we've done it, and I think what would be consistent with the agenda and the detailed materials, is to attach that to that discussion item in the agenda, is to make a link to that. So I'll take the PDF you sent me, put it in that same common convention area, and then provide a link to it from you know, either your initial, I forget if it was a proposal or a counter proposal, and then just link to that.
That was to the delegate business. Natalie, in her statement, impugns me. So maybe you would attach it to her statement so that people can go, well, what's this all about?
Oh, okay. Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, I forgot when that came up.
That's what that's all about.
Okay, yeah, I'll put that off to the side there. Thanks, Chuck.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and then so these speeches, is that like if I went on my Zoom and just recorded for 3 minutes and
You
then?
can do it yourself. You can do it with a friend. You can do it with me. Just 3 minutes. I've got some good like podcast software. It takes out the ums and ahs and you know and
So if I
those kinds
called
of
you,
things.
so if I called you and scheduled that, then we could do it on your technology and it would be pretty. It wouldn't be an ugly, rough. You could give it a cleaner cut.
Yeah, we do a little cleanup on it.
Okay, I'll follow you up on that. Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question. You know, maybe my ears are broken, but when I was talking about the lack of events in Portland, and I did mention the event Justin's managing tomorrow, Seth interrupted me and said, well, Joe, we've blocked you from going to events. Now, I don't know what kind of secret technology he's got, but did anybody also hear that when I was saying there really aren't any local events in the Portland chapter? And he says, well, Seth bumped in and says, that's well, because we exclude you from those, or we blocked you from those invitations or whatever. I'm just wondering.
I heard that, Joe.
Yeah, I heard it.
Yeah, that
No,
actually,
you're not blocked from it. You're just not specifically invited, and probably Facebook isn't giving you the information.
well, so like,
We're not doing anything specifically to keep you out. We're not explicitly
It's
reaching
not
out to you.
sharing with you. Don't want you there.
right. So Seth,
We've had a lot of complaints from others when you're present, so we
Seth, you're
decided
saying
not
two
to
things
invite
at
you
the same
specifically.
time. Seth, you're saying two things at the same time. You're saying you're not blocked, but yet you're not invited. And I'm wondering, like, you're also saying that there's been some complaints, and I would like to know the body of those complaints. For example, I was canvassing for a candidate confam, and I waited in line to talk to the candidate, and in front of me was Natalie. Natalie talked to her for many minutes. Then Natalie stepped aside from the candidate, leaving space for me to step forward and talk to the candidate, at which I did talk to the candidate. I introduced myself as Joe, the fool and prima donna. And the candidate said, well, why? What's going on with that? I said, well, that's the title I'm given online by Natalie, my former Green Party member. And then Natalie later turned it around into me being adversarial and insulting her, harassing her. She used like 8 different adjectives. So I'm wondering if I could get the body of those complaints. You can redact the names. I don't need to know the names of them, but if there are complaints against me and you're saying in public that there are, well, let's bring those forward. Maybe you can exclude me like Marv or whatever. But I think like Seth,
You just gave your own personal story that demonstrated.
so I can't go up to my lawmaker in a public park. Natalie in front of me, like talks to the candidate. Natalie ends her conversation with a representative of one of the 400, one of the 60 lawmakers in Salem. Natalie walks away from that conversation, and I start the conversation by saying I label myself as a fool and a prima donna. And you're saying that that's me incriminating myself? I as someone who
Natalie had not started that interaction, and you clearly were trying to troll and in front of a legislator.
Well, Seth,
You could have talked about issues.
Were you there, Seth? Did you hear?
He just described it to me.
Seth.
Well, but you weren't there. You don't know.
Seth, right. So Seth, I think you're doing your thing where you're saying three things at the same time to just cloud the issue. I know you do this. So let's get back to the thing where you and Natalie compile all the events that the Green Party passed going back to 2004 when I was active here. And you come up with those complaints, dig them up. If you lost them, call the person and say, could you send another statement about what happened 10 years ago? Like, because I could do this